So I served from March 2013 to September 2014. And I was called to the Argentina Bahia Blanca mission. Couldn't say that when I read my call, but now I can. And then I served in Argentina. I served in 5 areas. I started off in Olavarria, and then I went to Santa Rosa, Tandil, Mar del Plata, and then I finished off my mission in Carmen de Patagones. And so what's funny is it's a huge mission. It covers parts of 3 different provinces, like the states. And so I served in all of the corners of all the different provinces. So I jumped around a lot, but it was a lot of fun. My mission itself, the northeast part of my mission is the bottom part of the Buenos Aires province. So we don't have the city of Buenos Aires, but like just the south part of that state. And then we have all of the province of La Pampa. And then we have one city in Rio de Negro. And so we covered 3 different states, and so our mission was huge. And we always had to cross these weird state borders and everything. But it was a lot of fun because it was kind of hard being moved around to so many different areas because I was constantly on a bus for like 8 hours. And you're not always with people you know. I mean, they try to put you on buses with other missionaries. That doesn't always happen. And so being this little gringo girl riding a bus by myself was so nerve-wracking, and I didn't know where I was going, or I didn't know where to get off the bus, and it was so scary. But it's just really fun because, because you have the Spirit constantly, you are blessed in ways you don't even realize. I think I woke up at the right times, and I was able to ask someone if we'd already passed my stop, and they're like, no, you still have 2 more stops. And one thing I loved about the bus rides was that because they were so long, I was able to talk to people that was around me and even share my message with them, even though I was probably never going to see them again. I could explain a little bit about myself, why I looked different and why I was wearing a dress and had a name tag and everything, and share the gospel with them. And those were probably some of the most fun times I had because there was no pressure, because sometimes you get nervous talking to people because you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to come see them again, and what if they don't accept the gospel and da-da-da. But I loved those because I was like, I can give them the contact information for the church, and it's up to them if they want to hear it. But I know that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing and sharing my testimony with them, And so I got to meet the most interesting people on the bus. And one huge thing about Argentina is they drink mate down there. And most Americans think it is the grossest thing ever. And I did too when I first got there, but now I love it. And so I remember one time I was riding the bus, and we were probably a good 4 or 5 hours into the bus ride, and I turn around, and this guy gets under his seat and pulls out this mate cup and just starts making a mate drink. And I was like, where did he get that from? And it was just so random how they will drink mate at any point they possibly can, with any break. If they're at work, I swear I saw someone drinking at a church one time, anywhere they will drink mate because they love it so much. And so we weren't allowed to drink it, but it was a good opportunity for us to kind of explain why we can't drink it and explain a little bit about the rules and everything of the mission. But it's just crazy how easy it is to find points to talk about with people. We would just find things about their culture or their families or just what's important to them and find a way to connect that to the gospel and then just start teaching about it. And I found out that that's one of the best ways to teach the people down there, because you're connecting to them and their culture, and they really appreciate that you're trying to accept them and, try to become part of their culture while you're living in their country. And they had a lot of respect for us because of that. A little bit about history of Argentina is the country itself, majority of the people were actually refugees from other countries. Honestly, the most famous or common one, I guess, would be in Germany when all the Nazis and all the crazy stuff was happening during the war. A lot of refugees took boats down to Argentina and they just landed and settled different towns and cities down there. So actually in Argentina, there's not a lot of darker skinned people. The majority of them are actually white, and so I didn't feel super out of place. I mean, a little bit because I had, blonde hair and blue eyes and everything. But it was really interesting because people didn't always assume I was from America. I got, people would always guess where I was from, and they thought I was German most of the time, and they would guess all these random countries. But what I thought was interesting was that they didn't have the typical Latino background culture, like you think about in Mexico or Peru or something like that. They don't have those type of backgrounds. And so you'll actually meet a lot of people that still know German because of their families and everything. And because of that, we didn't eat typical Latino food. We ate a lot of pasta and potatoes because it's more of a European thing. And so the culture itself is European based, especially how the houses and cities are set up. They're not set up with like each individual house. It's more of a European style where everything's just like stuck to each other and they just build an entire block, next to each other. And so one thing that was fun was trying to learn how to know when someone was knocking at your door and not knocking next door, because everyone has fences outside their house, and so you couldn't actually knock on their doors. You would have to clap outside of their fences. And so you learned how to figure out if they were clapping at your fence or at somebody else's. And it was really fun because if my companions and I were ever bored in the street, we'd practice our clapping and try different ways to clap. And it was just like one of the things that we did in the streets, because it's not like we had a car and we could play games in the car. But yeah, that's one thing I really liked about Argentina, was learning about their history and their culture, and how it's not the typical Latino culture, but rather everything from Europe, and learning more about European history than South American history, I guess. It was really fun. There were a ton of challenges down there because the country itself is pretty much a Catholic country. And the hard thing is that majority of people are Catholic, but they don't actually go to church. They don't, participate in any of the religious ceremonies or anything. Like on a good year, they'll go for Christmas or something, but they don't actually practice their religion. They just say that they're Roman Catholic and they don't want to hear anything else from a different church. And so that was a huge challenge, was trying to explain to people why they need to actually practice what they believe, and, to help them find the true church, because they were so stuck on tradition. And it was really hard because we even met a lot of people that listened to our discussions. They gained testimonies of the church, but refused to be baptized because they were Catholic. And because of their family traditions, they couldn't be baptized into another church. So that was super hard for me to watch these people gain a testimony of Jesus Christ and of the gospel, and then not be able to enter the waters of baptism. So that was super, super hard for me. And then another challenge, which kind of is the same thing, another big church that's down there is the Evangelist Church. And that was super hard because I can remember at least like 5 or 6 times where an evangelist missionary would try to like smack me with the Spirit. I don't know if you've heard of them doing that, but it is very awkward because I don't believe in that spirit. And so it's super hard to explain to them, oh, I already have the gift of the Holy Ghost, thank you so much anyways. Like, it was really hard to get to know those people because they're so stuck on their church. And one thing I did respect about that church is they do believe they practice what they believe, and they go out and they have missionaries, and it's really similar to our gospel. So I really respected them in that aspect, but at the same time, it was really hard because they were so similar to our church. It was really hard to teach the evangelist people the differences between the church and why our church was the true church of Jesus Christ, and, how to feel the Spirit in a different way. Because they tend to feel the Spirit very strongly with very loud music and bands and everything, and that gets your adrenaline going, and so it's sometimes hard to tell them about the reverence that we find in our church and everything. So that was definitely a challenge for me, was trying to find a way to teach these people so that they can know how to feel the true Spirit of, Jesus Christ and Heavenly Father, and how to find the true church and how to pray to know if it's true and everything. And then another huge, huge challenge that is found in Argentina is the concept of marriage, because nobody gets married because it is way too expensive and nobody can afford it. And so they'll just live together. And then because of that, it's also really expensive to get divorced. So even if we taught somebody and they gained a testimony of the church and they wanted to be baptized, and so they had to get married to be baptized, the chances are they're both already married to somebody else, but they never got a divorce, and so now they're living together, and they probably already have children together. And so it's so hard because they won't get divorced because they can't afford it, or, the marriage was in a different state, and so it's basically impossible if you already live in a different state. And so that was also really hard, was first of all trying to convince them the importance of marriage and why, it's important in the church and everything. But then once they realize how important it is, actually getting them to get married and getting all the paperwork and finding their documents and trying to find a way to get married, it was such a struggle. But it's always amazing to see the chosen ones that actually will go through the steps and do everything they possibly can to get married. And actually, while I was there, I was teaching this family. We ran into some less actives, and we were trying to reactivate them. And it was just at a point in their lives where they really needed the church, and so they just clung to the gospel, and they were so excited to have it in their lives again. And the mom had, I don't think her and her previous partner had ever been married, but they had a couple kids together. And then now she was living with another guy who had been married previously, but he never got divorced. And so it was super hard because they weren't living the commandments, but we were teaching them, and they were like, okay, we'll live it, we'll get married, we're going to do everything we can so that her spouse, but they're not married, could get baptized and so they could be sealed in the temple. And so it was really hard because it was such a struggle for their family to try to get him divorced, and it took months. And while I was there, they never were able to get him divorced, but I've stayed in contact with them, and so they were able to tell me that he did get divorced, and so they were planning their marriage, and they're planning their trip to the temple in a year to get sealed as a family. And so it's just so amazing to see that even though it's such a struggle, that the people that really have a testimony of Jesus Christ, they will do anything they possibly can to be able to receive the covenants that they need, and so that they can be part of the family of Jesus Christ and be sealed as a family. And it's so amazing to see their testimonies grow and just how important that is for them. I mean, if you don't have appointments and if members aren't giving you referrals, the only thing that really is left to do is knock doors, which is probably the least effective way to find people to teach, but it was kind of the resort we were left with most of the time. But when we were able to have members help us, we found the most success in that, obviously, but it wasn't always available to us because in some of my areas, the members weren't as excited to help the missionaries. But it was fun to see in the areas that did have a really good word missionary program, how excited the members were to be a part of it and come tracting with us and everything. They just got so excited about it. And the baptisms in that area were way higher than in other areas that the members weren't really participating in the work with. And then after Mar del Plata, I got transferred to my last area, which was Carmen de Patagones. And Carmen de Patagones is so different from the rest of my areas. It's on the border of Buenos Aires and Rio Negro. And so there's a famous river called El Rio Negro. And that's what separated the states from each other, but it also separated our district, I guess. Like half of our district was on one side, and then my one little city was part of that district, but we were all like kind of by ourselves. And so for district meeting every week, we had to cross this river. We would take a bus across the river, and it was like the most beautiful river you have ever seen in your life. And it was so amazing to be able to see it so much. But so that kind of took a lot of time out of our schedules on Wednesdays. I think we had our meetings on our Tuesdays. So we had to kind of plan that accordingly and try to figure out our lunches so that we could take the bus back to our area and then walk to the members' houses and everything. So that was a little bit of a struggle, but luckily the member we ate with those days, he had a car, and so if we ever got lost or stuck, he could just come pick us up, and he was the branch president, so he didn't even mind doing it. He was so amazing. So that was really amazing because there was this beautiful river, and so I wanted to go to the river every P-Day just to go look at the water and look at all the ducks and everything, and it was so much fun. And we couldn't do it a lot, but I think my favorite part about that river was there's this little boat that can take you across the river. So there's two bridges. You can either take a bus across the bridge or you could take this little boat across the water. And that was my favorite thing to do, but we only did it once or twice because it just took longer and we didn't have time. But I remember for my birthday, we decided we were going to take the boat across and we were going to have lunch in the city. And we ate at this really random, it was like a Chinese buffet, but Argentine style. And it was really weird to see how they tried to combine both cultures in this buffet. And it was like the weirdest food I had down there, but it was still really good. But so that was one of my most fun days there, like besides working, that we had, because we just did the most random things and just had fun the whole day. And so that area is really special because of the river. Everyone loves it because of the river. But that area is probably one of the most special to me because that's one of the areas I was in longest, and so I got to know the members really well in that area. And that's the area I actually taught the family that was, trying to get divorced and remarried and everything. That's where they lived, and so they were just so amazing. And we got to teach their daughter, who was 8 years old, and then before I left, she was able to be baptized, and so it was so amazing to see how this family was just growing in the gospel so much. But what was amazing in that area was the work was already, flourishing and doing so great before I got there, and we had these recent converts that were so excited to help us teach, and they would go out with us every day if they could, to help us teach these missionaries, and they just had such strong testimonies. And we had a couple of recent converts that their husbands weren't members, and that was really hard for them, but they had such a great family life because in Argentina, family is like the most important thing down there, and they never really move far away from their family, and so they're always within a couple blocks of each other. And so we had a recent convert where her and her daughter were members, but her husband wasn't, and then she would always be with her sister's family, but no one in her sister's family were members. But while we were there, her nephew ended up starting to take the lessons. So they got permission from the parents, and they knew that we were, good people because her sister had talked up the church so much. And so because of that, the elders started teaching, both families and trying to just strengthen everyone there. And then it was so amazing to see that they convinced the mom that wasn't a member to go one Sunday, and because of that, she just had the strongest testimony, and it just changed her life. And from then on, her and her son went every Sunday and got to spend time with her sister and everything, but the two husbands never went. I mean, they would go to activities, but they, didn't want to be baptized. They would hear the discussions, but they would never commit to anything. They had a lot of respect for the church, they just didn't believe in it. And so that was really hard on the families. It wasn't tearing the family apart just because the husbands were supportive and, let them do everything with the church. But it was hard to see that they couldn't find that happiness together as a family. But since I've been home, I learned that all of the men in their family got baptized, and they actually just a couple months ago went to the temple as a family, and it's so amazing to see that because when we were there, the husband was awesome. He was so funny. He loved us missionaries. He just didn't want to get baptized. But he read the scriptures every day. He was like a perfect investigator, minus the fact that he didn't want to get baptized or couldn't because he couldn't keep his commitments, And so I remember sometimes we would go over there and he would be so drunk, and he was so funny when he was drunk, but obviously not a super awesome thing for us as missionaries. And so it was so funny, well, not funny, so amazing to see how we could see this change in him where he was so of the world and just focused on his work, and he would just spend his entire paycheck on on going to the bar and everything. And the wife actually told us a few times he would come home on a Friday night and I wouldn't see him till Monday or Tuesday. She's like, I had no idea where he was, but he would always come back. He wasn't going to abandon the family, but he just didn't have that. He didn't have the understanding of why it was so important to be a part of the family and, to follow the commandments and everything. But it's so amazing to see the change that he's had, and he is so happy in the gospel, and he is constantly posting things on Facebook about the church, and he went to the temple and he was so excited about it, and he's constantly posting pictures of Jesus Christ and everything. And so it's so amazing to see how he finally was able to gain the testimony he needed to quit drinking and quit smoking so that he could get baptized and just be so happy with his family. So I think that area was really special to me just because of a few families that I was able to get to know really well, because none of them could get baptized while I was in the area, but we worked with them so much, and then it's so amazing to see how much they've progressed since I've been gone. That area is so special because the members are so amazing down there, and they're all so willing to help out the missionaries, but just to see how much the work is still progressing after I've left and to see how well the missionaries are still doing there, it's really special. It was really sad to leave. So then after that, I got transferred to Mar del Plata, which I knew I was going to get transferred that time, so it was really hard on me because I was just crying the entire week. Before we even got the call, I was like, I know I'm being transferred this time, and I just don't want to go. And I was so worried about my recent converts, and it was really hard for me to go. But, I got the call, I got transferred, and I felt the Spirit, and I knew that it was where I was supposed to go. So I went to Mar del Plata, and it's like a typical beach city. So it's on the coast, and it's a huge city. Like, I would probably compare it to San Diego. Obviously not as big and grand as San Diego because it's Argentina. And everything is still just made out of concrete because everything in that country is made out of concrete, and that's it. But so it was really weird to be in such a metropolitan city, however you say that. But it was so much fun, and the work there just was so amazing. Everyone was on fire in that city, and we had such great investigators, and I thought it was going to be really tempting serving next to the beach because I'm from California and I missed the beach so much. But I was actually really surprised that as much as I loved it, when I was close, I'd be like, oh, I can see the water, life is great again. I wasn't even tempted with anything, to go swimming or anything. But it was a really fun city to be in. But it was weird because the climate was so different from my other areas because all of Argentina is humid, but it was a different humidity, and it was the salty humidity. And so it was weird trying to figure out how to change a little bit to be in that city itself. But our area in that city was probably one of my biggest areas, and it wasn't a big square. It was kind of a long rectangle. And so we would have an appointment that would be probably 20 or 30 blocks north, and we'd have 5 minutes to get to that appointment, and we were how are we going to do this? So I learned the bus routes really well in that area because we would just take the bus as much as we could afford to do that. But the thing that was really hard in that area was our investigators were eternal investigators. They had such strong testimonies, but they had been investigating the church for years. And with half of them, their family members were members. They just never felt the need to actually be baptized. And so it was really hard to teach them because we loved them so much, and they knew all the doctrine. They might not have had testimonies of everything, but majority of things they knew was true and everything. They just hadn't either been able to get baptized or just didn't feel the desire yet. And so that was probably the hardest thing for me, was getting to know these investigators that have been through probably 10 sets of missionaries and still hadn't been baptized. But it was really amazing because with one of the investigators, he had had a tragedy in his family, and because of that, we were able to teach the doctrine of eternal families and why it's so important to be sealed in the temple and everything, and that's when it just clicked for him. And so he was like, all right, I'm ready. And so we were able to baptize him, and he had already been to church for years, and so we didn't even have to wait for him to go to church 3 times. We set a baptism date for that Saturday, and so he was able to be baptized, and his family was so excited. And it was so awesome to see how excited he was after he got baptized, and he was just on fire in the gospel. He went to all of his meetings, and when he received the priesthood, he was so excited. And then at state conference, everyone sustained him as an elder, and it was just so amazing to see the change in him and how excited he got with everything. But yeah, with the city itself of Mar del Plata, it's a more city-like place, and with the beach and everything, it's really hard. So we'd always want to go to the beach on P days and just go relax in the sand, and we really could only do that in the mornings because we didn't really have time the rest of the day, and there was only certain things we could do at the beach, and so it was really hard, and you had to go super early in the morning before people got there. So I never actually went to the beach. That was really hard for me, but it was still really great. And then there was also a downtown area in that city as well, so if we ever needed to do clothes or shoe shopping or anything, we could go in there. But that area was also a little weird because when we did our grocery shopping every Monday, they don't use plastic bags in that city. They're basically outlawed. And so we had to buy reusable bags. And if we forgot them, we were carrying our groceries just in our hands because they couldn't give us plastic bags. And so that was a really random problem that popped up for me because I wasn't used to it, and my companion forgot to tell me. So that was a weird first Monday when I was there. But yeah, that area was awesome, and the members there are just so excited to teach, and we had, between us and the elders when we were there, we had so much success, and everyone, because we were having success and having baptisms, that just got the members even more excited, and like the member missionary work just flourished in that area when I left. I don't know whatever happened to it, but it was really great, that area. So Olavarria was interesting for me because it was my first area, so I couldn't really speak Spanish at all. I said like 5 words or memorized a couple phrases from the Preach My Gospel, you know. And so I showed up there, and my mission companion had traveled with me after, you know, we got to the mission home and everything. She was able to ride with me because she had just had transfers as well. So it was really hard for us at first because we opened up that area for sisters. So there had already been elders there and everything, and, you know, the branch was doing great, but they hadn't had sisters in a while. And so it was really hard to gain the trust of the members because they were so used to elders and everything. And what was also really hard was that we didn't really have any investigators at all. We had no place to start. We had an old like area book, and so we would try to go through and find old investigators and everything, but it was really hard for us to just start the work in our area. But it was also really amazing for me to be in that area because, you know, the elders obviously helped us a lot, and my district leader was in my ward, and so we shared an area, so they helped us a ton. But at the same time, they helped us so much to find investigators, and then we also helped teach their investigators. Like if they were ever struggling to teach a certain doctrine of the gospel, they would ask us sisters to help them because we're obviously more spiritual. No. But so they would ask us to help them, and so we would have a crazy lesson where we'd have a couple investigators and then 4 missionaries, and so it could seem kind of intimidating, but it wasn't, just because we were all so, you know, down to earth and cool and everything. But I remember one time, it was one of the first lessons that we taught them. The elders were struggling to teach the doctrine of baptism and why baptism by the proper authority of God is so important and why baptism in another church isn't actually valid and everything. And they just could not get the investigator to understand the point of the doctrine. And so they brought us in, and we were teaching this investigator, and we were in the church building, and we opened up the door to the baptismal font. And so it was so cool to see that, you know, they were looking at the baptismal font and where they could be baptized. And then one of the elders actually took the investigator down into the baptismal font and showed him what would be happening, you know, at his baptism and everything. And the Spirit was just so strong because we were talking about baptism, and that's just a spiritual topic, you know, by itself. But at the same time, it was so cool for me to watch all these missionaries teaching so many different aspects of baptism and how important it is. And then they all kind of turned to me, like, for my turn to testify, and I was like, I don't even know how to say anything right now. Like, I was just enjoying the lesson, watching and everything, and then it was my turn to testify. And so I tried my best to just mutter out some broken Spanish testimony about baptism, and I know for a fact I used the wrong conjugation of baptism, like, every time I said the word. And so I'm sure he didn't understand my actual Spanish, but because I just jumped in just praying and just hoping the Spirit would be with me, even though I was not speaking correct Spanish at all. The Spirit was so strong, and it testified to him. And after that lesson, he accepted a baptismal date, and then he got baptized, and it was so amazing for me. So that was a really, really special experience for me because even though it wasn't my investigator, I was there and I was able to testify to him and then watch him enter into the waters of baptism. So that was a really special area for me because it was the first time I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually happening. Like, I'm on a mission, we're baptizing people, and it was so amazing. But that area was really interesting for me just because it was my first. I was learning all the different things. I was learning about how to take taxis because I had never done that before. And I was learning about, you know, all the safety rules about crossing train tracks and crossing busy streets and everything because they don't have crosswalks or lights or anything like that. They don't even have stop signs really in Argentina, ever. And it's not like you have roundabouts down there. You just approach a corner, and if no one's coming, you just go for it. And so it was sometimes really dangerous to cross streets, and so it was kind of just the culture shock area for me where I was learning everything about Argentina. But it was so amazing just because we would, you know, meet up with the members, and they were just so strong down there. It was a pretty small branch, and they were in this district that was across so many different cities because none of the branches were big enough to become a ward, and so they couldn't become a stake or anything. And so there wasn't a ton of people filling up the church every Sunday, but the people that were there were so faithful and just had such strong testimonies, and like rain or shine, they were in church on Sundays. And so it was so amazing to see that their faith and, you know, how much they were willing to go through with the church and how much they wanted to help us find people to teach. So that was very interesting for me because I couldn't speak Spanish, and I obviously had no idea about the city or even how to navigate a city in Argentina. But my companion, she was awesome. She taught me a lot about patience and about perseverance. But one thing she couldn't teach me a lot about was Spanish, just because she didn't know any English, and so it was really hard for her to teach me about Spanish. And so my hardest challenge in that area was my language, because I didn't really feel like I was improving at all. I seriously felt like my language actually like went down when I was in my first area because I was so frustrated, and I just like, I don't know, maybe I wasn't studying the right things or something. But I would talk to these American elders, and they would, you know, give me advice and everything. But I remember just being so fed up with my companion because she would lose patience with me and then just call an American elder and be like, translate this for me. And I was like, no, you need to figure out a way to tell me yourself. But so it was really good for me because we only spoke Spanish. And so even though I didn't understand half of it, you know, I was trying. But it was so amazing to see how I could just push forward. And even though I couldn't talk to my companion half of the time, I just prayed and be like, all right, just help me to say this one thing to her because I need to tell her what's going on, you know. So it was really hard, probably one of my hardest areas, but definitely one of the most memorable just because I learned so much and I grew so much from my first area. But yeah. So then I was only with my trainer for one transfer, and then I got moved to a different area. So after that first transfer, I got moved to Santa Rosa, and I had a second trainer, and she was awesome. She was so hardworking, and I was so tired working with her, but it really helped me a lot. But that city is so amazing. Santa Rosa is the capital of La Pampa, and so we actually didn't live in our area, and so we had to either take the bus or walk to our area, and so we had to go through El Centro, it's kind of like downtown, to get to our area. And so it was really cool to see because in La Pampa, that's where all of the gauchos are and like all of the, you know, Argentine cowboys pretty much with all their ranches and everything. And so it's just like desert there, and like you just go and there's these random farms, but majority of it's just dirt everywhere. And so it was really interesting for me to go from like an actual city with roads and everything to just dirt everything. But it was so much fun, and I learned how to teach while also shielding my eyes from the wind and all the dirt that was pelting me. So that was also a talent I picked up in Santa Rosa because there was so much wind there all the time. But it was so beautiful. That's one of my favorite areas. And what's really cool about there is they have a couple museums about like the history of the state, and so we could go in and see all this really cool stuff about how, you know, the city was settled and how they were able to, you know, invent all these random things. And it was really fun to see the history of the city itself. But my favorite thing about this area was the excitement the members had to work with the missionaries, and we had an awesome word mission leader. He was one of the first people in that, I think it was the city or the state, probably both actually, one of the first to be baptized. And so he was one of the pioneers of this stake, and so he has such a strong testimony, and his entire family as well. And so we'd go over and have our meetings with him every week, and then we'd have lunch with their family because lunch is the, you know, big meal there. We don't eat very much dinner. And so it was so amazing to see how, because he has such a strong testimony, we got the entire ward excited about the missionary work. And so we were able to go on splits all the time with the members and just go teach a bunch of people. And it was so amazing to see, because of their excitement, how much the ward could grow. You know, we didn't have baptisms every week, but we were teaching a lot of people that were progressing, and we would have investigators at church and everything. And it was so amazing. All of our investigators, they were just progressing so nicely. There was just a few little hang-ups with the commandments, so they couldn't be baptized yet. But just to see, you know, how much faith they had in their testimonies and everything. So that stake is very near and dear to my heart. But I think one of the biggest comforts I found in that stake was the bishop at the time. Bishop Pilate. He spent a couple years in America studying at one of the colleges here. I don't remember which college it was. But so he spoke English, and so I got there to the first ward council, and he spoke in English, and I about cried because I was so excited to hear some English. And I was like, I can talk to somebody. Life is so great right now. And he was just like, you need to learn Spanish, but you get to the point where you've had it with Spanish, you can't think anymore, you just need to speak English. He's like, you can always come up and talk to me, and we can figure it out. And so I think I was kind of his favorite just because I loved him so much because he spoke English, and he always was so nice to me and all of us missionaries and everything. And when I got to that area, we had 4 missionaries in that ward. We had 2 elders and 2 sisters. And so we worked together so much. We just were able to find a way to teach so many people and work together. And because of that, the members could see how strong we were as missionaries, and that got them even more excited to help us. And we had open houses for the church where people could just come in and look around the church and learn more about everything. And it was just so amazing to see how even in a big city, the members could be so close and have such strong testimonies. But I really liked that because everybody in the mission, their dream was to serve in Santa Rosa because it's where the gauchos are and all of the cool historical stuff of the mission. So I didn't really realize it at the time how special it was that I had served there. But then later I was like, oh yeah, I served in Santa Rosa, and I felt all cool as a missionary because I got to serve in everybody's dream area, and it was so much fun. The members there are just awesome, and the city itself is really cool, and there's so many different things to see. There's actually a lake in that area, and so one P-Day we all got to go down and have a picnic by the lake, and as sisters we had a little photo shoot by the lake, and it was so much fun, and there's just a lot to do there, so it was a really fun area. So after Santa Rosa, I went to Tandil, and what was funny was I had a zone leader in Santa Rosa who got transferred before I did. And then the next transfer when I went to Tandil, I get off the bus and he's like, Hermana Harrison. I'm like, what are you doing here? So it was so funny because he was my zone leader twice, and we got to see each other a lot on the mission. And so showing up to Tandil was really hard because there apparently had been some previous sisters that didn't work well with the missionaries or something, or with the members. And so we had zero trust with the members. They just didn't trust sisters at all. They loved the elders. They would go out with the elders and teach with them, but nobody would leave with us. And so it was really, really hard to get the members involved in our investigators and our work and everything. But we were, I don't know how, but we were able to find trust with these members and just try to serve them as much as we could. And even the members that did not like us, but they still fed us because they felt an obligation to, we were able to find love for them. Even we were so frustrated with them, but despite that, we were able to love them and just serve them and do everything we could possibly do to help them. And we were able to see a difference in the members, and how much they grew to love the sisters, and they would leave with us to go teach lessons and everything. And it was really cool to see the change in their opinion of sister missionaries when we were there. And then my second transfer in that area, I was called to train a new missionary, and that was so nerve-wracking for me because I was still trying to find my ground with Spanish and everything, and it was so crazy. And I was like, are you sure I'm supposed to train? I don't think I'm ready for this yet. But I was really nervous because I thought I was going to be a really bad trainer because I was either super scared to train a Latina because I figured she would just judge me by how bad my Spanish was and just not think I knew anything. Or I was really scared I was going to teach an American and just want to talk English with her all the time and just have both of our Spanish go down the drain. But I was so nervous about it, and so I prayed that entire weekend until my new missionary got there. But on the day of transfers, I went to the bus station to pick her up. And she got off the bus, and as soon as I saw her, I just had the biggest smile on my face, and I just ran to her and gave her a huge hug. And I was like, I'm your trainer. Well, I was talking in Spanish, but it was just so much fun, and she was so beautiful. She is blonde hair, blue-eyed, just like me, and I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting in a Latino culture, having 2 sisters that are blonde hair, blue eyes, walking through the streets. It's going to be interesting for sure. But she was so amazing, and because of her excitement and dedication to being a missionary, she couldn't speak super well, but we only spoke Spanish. We never spoke English to each other, and we were just able to grow so much together. And because of that, I think the members also saw how much she grew, and so they also got really excited to help us even more with the work. And so they saw her be born, and she was in that area for I think like 4 or 5 transfers, and so they got to see her learn Spanish and grow so much on her mission. And so because of that, you know, the members in this area really supported the missionaries, and the work was able to grow, and we were able to baptize a couple, and that was like the highlight of my mission, because I was like, I baptized a family. It was so wonderful. But that area itself, physically, was probably one of my hardest areas, because Argentina is so flat, like 0 mountains or anything until you get to the Andes, you know? But in that area, the entire city is hills. And so I was so used to just walking flat, and I could walk for miles, but then I get to this area and all of a sudden I was walking up and down hills, and my calves were killing me. My feet were hurting so bad, and it was so random, because I was like, where did these hills come from? And they thought they lived in the mountains, and then we'd show them pictures of like, you know, Utah, and they'd be like, all right, actually we don't have the mountains, but we still have pride for our hills, you know? But so that area was hard physically for me because of the difference in how the city was. And then also that area was hard for me because the city itself and the area was really big. And so we had, you know, a really residential area, but then we also had a part of the city that was across the highway, and there was like a random neighborhood. And so we weren't allowed to be there after dark to start with, because it was a little too dangerous for sisters to be over there. And so we had to really plan out when we were gonna, you know, work in that area. But then not only trying to figure out what time of day to be there, but also trying to figure out how to cross this really busy highway, because you just had to cross the highway. So it wasn't like a freeway, it was just a 2 or 3 lane highway both ways. And so we would have to like really time it out nice when we could just run across and hope we don't get hit by a car. So that was also really hard for us, because we didn't want to walk. There was, I think, a walkway like a mile down where it like went over the highway, but we didn't want to walk all the way over there because we didn't have time. And so we just risked our lives all the time, and it was great. It was so much fun. We just made a game out of it. So we just tried to have positive attitudes about it the whole time. But yeah, so I think that was hard for us, was there was a couple areas we weren't allowed to be in very much. And so it was really hard because we found such awesome people in these areas, but we couldn't go and teach them very often. And so we had to end up just giving the investigators to the elders, because they could be over there longer than we could. But it was still such a great area, and it was so cool for me to see how much the members were able to trust us as missionaries, and were able to love us as much as they loved the elders, which was a huge thing for us, but we were very proud of ourselves for that. So that was a really fun area too. So I actually got robbed one time. And it was not our fault, because we weren't doing the robbing, but it was kind of our fault. So one day, we had been teaching a lesson, and it was going great. And so the rule is in the mission is you have to be home at 9 o'clock, but if you're teaching a lesson, you can be home at 9:30, right? So we were teaching, and we kind of lost track of time, so we ended up leaving their house around 9:30, and I was freaking out, because I was like, we're late, we need to get back to the apartment. And we were like probably 10 blocks away, so we were just walking super fast and trying to get home. And so we were doing the best we could to be obedient, which is great, but we should have been home at 9:30. And so we were just walking home as fast as we could. And as we were walking home, one of our neighbors, we had contacted a couple days before, and they said they wanted to listen to our message again. And so we had gone back probably 10 times, and we could never find this person. Probably wasn't actually interested, but you know, we tried. And so when we were walking back, we saw that his light was on, and we were like, oh my gosh, he's home. Oh my gosh, do we knock? And so we seriously sat in the street for probably like 3 minutes trying to decide if it was more important to go home and be on time, or if we should knock on his door. And we both felt the Spirit and felt like we needed to knock on the door. But then in my obedient mind, I was like, no, it's more important that we're obedient. We'll be blessed for our obedience. Let's just ignore the Spirit a little bit and get home. And we're like, okay, we'll go home and we'll knock on his door first thing tomorrow morning. And while we were discussing this person walked past us in the street, and my companion got a really weird feeling about it, but she kind of ignored it because we were discussing what to do with this investigator. And so when we decided to just keep going home, we only lived like 2 houses down. We kept walking, and then the person that was walking past us turned around and walked toward us, and we both just had like a sinking feeling in our stomach. We're like, oh no, something's gonna happen. And so he walked to my companion first, and like it was really dark out, and so he like kind of pulled something out of his pocket and held it in my companion's face and was like, give me your cell phone. And my companion, she's a very tough girl and doesn't get scared easily. And so she actually pushed his hand away. We thought it was a knife, but it turns out it was just like a keychain flashlight or something, but he wanted us to think it was a knife. And so she wasn't scared at all, but I had no idea what was going on. And I was like slowly backing away, trying to get away from the situation because I had the cell phone and he wanted it, and it was like freaking me out. And so I wasn't gonna ditch my companion because that's completely against the rules, but I was like trying to distance myself a little bit from him. And so he kept asking her for the cell phone, and she's like, I don't have a cell phone. And then eventually, she was so sarcastic. She's like, I don't have the cell phone, but I have a Tic Tac. Would you like a Tic Tac? And I was sitting there like, you did not just offer a robber a Tic Tac. Like, are you kidding me right now? And I was just like freaking out. My heart was pounding, and I could like feel the cell phone in my pocket, and I was freaking out. And so I was still just backing away slowly. And I honestly could have like taken off and run, but I wasn't gonna just leave my companion, even though she kind of expected me to. But I wasn't gonna do that to her, so I just kept walking away, and then he looked at me and my heart dropped. And I'm like, oh my gosh, he knows I have the cell phone. So he ran over to me and was like, give me the cell phone. And I was about to say no and just kind of lie a little bit and be like, no, I don't have one either. But then, so we read the mission manual every morning, right? And so the line from the mission manual that says, do not resist robbers or people that come up to you, that entire line from the mission manual just flashed in my mind, and I was like, all right, fine. So I like pulled the cell phone out of my pocket, I lit it up so he could see that it was a cell phone. He took it and he ran. And I was like, oh, so he didn't even want to rob anything else. It was just a cell phone, because at that time I had my camera on me, I had money on me, like I had so many valuables on me at the time, which I don't know why I had that much on me because I never did. And so I was so surprised that he just wanted the cell phone, and he like ran off. And then as he was running away, my companion was like, is there anything else we can help you with? And I was like, shut up, hermano, we don't want him to come back. Like, I was freaking out. And so I was shaking the entire time. And so we like are so close to home, but we didn't have a cell phone, and our district leader was gonna call us any minute, and we're like, well, we don't have a phone on us. And so we're like, well, we don't want him freaking out that we're not answering the phone. So we decided to walk to the elder's apartment, and it was probably like 15 or 20 blocks away. And so we're walking to their apartment, and it's so late by this point. It's like almost 10 o'clock, and we're like, this has been an awful night. But as we were walking, we were just talking about it, and we ended up just laughing about it because we never felt like we were in danger because, you know, we had the Spirit with us and everything. We didn't feel like we were in danger. And we just laughed because we're like, he's the worst robber ever. A, he didn't even have a knife, nothing dangerous that he could have hurt us with. And B, he just took the cell phone and ran for it. Like, he didn't even ask us for anything else. We're like, it must have been his first time robbing someone because it was awful. And we just ended up laughing about it. And so we're just sitting there eating Tic Tacs, waiting for the elders to get home because they were also late because they were teaching a lesson. So eventually they get home and they're like, hermanos, what are you doing here? So we had to explain the entire situation, and we called the zone leaders, and the zone leaders told the elders to give us their cell phone because it's more important for the sisters to have a phone than the elders. And so they were all mad at us because they had a nice cell phone, and then we got it, and they were all jealous and stuff. But so it was really interesting because I was nervous during it, but then afterwards I was like, I knew I wasn't in danger. Nothing was going to happen to us. And so it was so amazing to feel the Spirit even in a crazy situation like that. And it turned out to just be a hilarious story for us to tell because he was just such a funny robber. There was one in particular. So in my area, Tandil, that was where we baptized the couple. We didn't have a ton of investigators, and so we were just tracting one day, and it was a really hot day. And we had been walking across this courtyard, and we were only like a block or two away from the church, and you can't drink the water there. And so our water bottles were empty, and so we were gonna go try to fill up the water because they had a big water thing in the church. But my companion, as we were walking, we saw this couple sitting on the wall, and she just like felt like she needed to go ask them for some water instead. And I was like, okay. I was always nervous asking people for water because I never knew if it was gonna come from purified or just the tap. And so I was always a little nervous about it, but we tried to do it as much as we could just to have a way to talk to people, you know? And so she felt like she needed to go ask him. I was like, all right, let's do it, let's go ask. So we asked this couple for some water, and they were so, happy to help us, and they came back with some juice for us. And so the secret is when you ask people for water, you have to drink it really slow, because then they have to sit out there and talk with you, and so it gave you a way better chance to talk to them about stuff, right? So we were just like slowly drinking our juice, and we got to know this couple, and they invited us to come back and teach them, and we were so excited. And the whole experience of teaching them was just so amazing. We went back for the first official lesson where we could sit down and talk to them, and the husband and wife were just sitting there. And then at the end of the lesson, the wife told us that she had lived in a different city before, had taken all the lessons. She was about to get baptized, but then her roommate, who was a member, was how she actually got to know the church. She moved, and so she just never saw the missionaries again, really. I don't know how they lost contact with her, but she just lost contact with the church. And so she had always wondered what would have happened if she would have gotten baptized and everything. And she still had her Book of Mormon, and she read it occasionally. Was such an amazing person, even not being a member of the church. And then when we were teaching her, she was like, ever since I moved to this city, because she moved to the city to marry her husband, so they were married, and we were like, you're actually married with a marriage certificate and everything. And they were, and we're like, that's a miracle in and of itself, because they were already married. And she was just so excited that we went up to her and asked her for some water, because she was like, I pass by that church every day, and she's like, I always want to go inside and meet with the missionaries. And she's like, but I've always been too scared, and I just didn't, have the confidence to walk in by myself and go meet with some people. And so she's like, I've been wanting to do it for months, but I never could. And then she's like, and then you knocked on our door and, talked to us and asked us for some water. And she's like, I knew that was a sign that I needed to do it. And so that was just a miracle for us, that she'd been craving the church again. She wanted to go take the lessons again. And then we were able to find her, and my companion felt like we needed to ask that person. And so that was a miracle in and of itself. And so the entire time we were teaching, and they were so excited, and she kept all of her commitments. She was really excited to be baptized. Her husband was a little bit harder. He was a little bit more weary about the church and wasn't as excited to get baptized, but he kept his commitments and did everything like that. And the lesson we had with him when he finally told us that he had prayed and gotten a testimony, that was probably the most spiritual experience I've ever had, just because he finally did it. He knelt down and prayed, and he felt the Spirit, and he wanted to be baptized. From then on, he was all for it, So that entire experience was super spiritual. But right before their baptism, we were teaching them one of the last lessons, and we were finalizing all of the baptism, details and everything, who they wanted to be baptized by, and all the prayers and everything. And he was like, so I need to tell you guys something that I've never told you before. And we're like, oh no, is this going to prevent him from being baptized? And we got a little bit nervous. But he was like, a couple weeks before you guys knocked on our door, I had a dream. And we were in heaven or something. And he was like, I was walking and I was just lost. And then I saw you two, and you guys were just able to help me find my way. And he was explaining this dream, and then he was like, and after we had been talking and you helped me, I saw a person, descending from heaven, and he described the exact portrait of Jesus Christ coming down with his hands out, over the desert, and he described that exact thing, and we showed him a picture. He's like, that's what it was in his dream. And he was like, I had a dream about you girls and about Jesus Christ. And so that was before we'd even met him. And so then afterwards, when he told us that, the Spirit was so strong. I don't even know how the Spirit could have been that strong in a room before. But he was just like, I know that this is the truth, because not only, do I have a testimony of it, but I dreamt about you before I even met you. And I knew that you two were going to be my angels. And they constantly called us their angels. And they were just so grateful for us. And they were so grateful for the truth that we were able to bring to them, and how much happiness we could give to them. And it was my miracle story of the mission, of my baptisms, because they were so prepared, and all they were waiting for was the missionaries to come knock on their door, And so that's when I really had a testimony of the elect, and how some people are just prepared to learn about the gospel, and some people just aren't ready yet. And this couple had been prepared, from all of their previous experiences with the church. And, and another thing he had told us was, when he was a little boy, he had been riding the bus, And his family had been kind of struggling a little bit when he was younger. And so he saw when he was on the bus, his mom walked in front of the church, like she had already like been planning to go there, and a member of the church had given her a huge grocery bag of food. And he was like, I had no idea that she had even had contact with the church or anything. And he's like, I don't know how they figured out we needed food, but he always remembered the kindness that the members showed his family and how they were always willing to help him and, you know, give him the food if they needed it. And so because of that experience when he was a little boy, he was so open to receive our message, you know, as an adult. And so it just was so amazing to see how all of their experiences led up to them finding the church and being baptized. And it was the most amazing baptism I had ever been a part of because the members were so involved in their conversion, and we had almost every single lesson we had a member present. And so they really connected with this one family. And so that was, you know, the dad was the person who was able to baptize them, and they just were so grateful for all the members, and they just found so many friends in the members. And actually during their baptism, the husband was kind of tall, and the guy that was baptizing him didn't scoot forward enough. And so when he baptized him, he completely hit his head on the wall of the baptismal font, like really hard. And so the guy kind of like fell into the water. And so it wasn't like a valid baptism. We had to baptize him again, but we were like, are you okay? Like, we didn't know if he had like a concussion or anything. And like, as soon as we like baptized him again and it was like, okay, he like walked out and he was rubbing his head. He's like, wow, I didn't think the Spirit was going to hit me that hard. And it was just so funny that like, even though he just got knocked out by being baptized, he was still so positive about it and so excited about his baptism. And after they were baptized, before the end of the service, they bore their testimonies, and it was just such a spiritual meeting, and everybody in the audience was crying. Even their friend who they invited to come watch their baptism, he was even crying, and it was just such an incredible experience, and the Spirit was so strong through the entire process, and we were just on cloud nine every day after we met with them. It was just so amazing. I think that was probably one of the most spiritual things I felt on my mission. So, clothes advice for the sisters, I have a good amount of, because I pretty much got all of the clothes you should not get for the mission, so take my advice. Your best friend is elastic. Elastic skirts are the best thing you could possibly get for your mission. When I was shopping for my mission, I went to like all of these nice stores like Kohl's and Burlington and everything, and I tried to get like nice pencil skirts and everything. Do not do that. Go to DI or to any random thrift shop and buy the ugliest, most comfortable skirts you can possibly find, because you're not going to care about how ugly it is in the mission. I dressed really ugly and people know it, but I didn't care because, you know, I tried to be comfortable. And I was really grateful for the elastic skirts because it is almost guaranteed you're going to gain weight on your mission. I gained a lot of weight on my mission. And I was so grateful for the elastic skirts because I was still able to breathe. Whereas other sisters, they were like struggling to pull up the zippers and everything. Like, elastic, best friend by far. And then another thing is just get simple shirts that are comfortable, just like t-shirts that are plain colors and like colors that'll match all your skirts and everything. But just comfortable t-shirts. You need a couple nice, you know, outfits for conferences and everything. But for the most part, when you're on the streets, you just want to be the most comfortable you can be so you can focus on the message. So my favorite shirts were just normal t-shirts, like v-necks or scoop necks, whatever, just solid colors, and then you can put colored cardigans with them. And I love that because layers is really, really good for down there because it's super humid. And so in the winter, it's really, really, really cold, and in the summer, it's really, really hot. And so you kind of get both extremes. And so you want to do a lot of layers. And so I would say like cardigans and scarves. Definitely take scarves because I only took 2, and so I had to buy a bunch down there, and it took away from a lot of money that I had. And so scarves, cardigans, really comfy skirts. And then for your shoes, my favorite pair of shoes were my Echo shoes. I just got a pair of normal black Mary Jane Echo shoes, and they were my favorites. They lasted me my entire mission, and I liked them more than my other pair of shoes. I got like these weird clogs that I hated. They were so uncomfortable, and I got blisters from them every time I wore them, and everyone made fun of me because they were so ugly. So I would say just Echoes are really expensive, but it is so worth it because you're not going to be happy if your feet hurt. And so you're going to be walking so much every day, so get the most comfortable pair of shoes you can possibly get that are going to last forever, because if you need to buy shoes down there, they will not last long, they won't be comfortable, and so you're just going to be miserable. So just get a couple of pair of really, really good, comfortable shoes. And then one thing I didn't take was one nice pair of flats for conferences, and I regretted that because I didn't want to take my ugly shoes to conferences because you're supposed to look nice when you're in the presence of president, right? And so I was always really embarrassed when I had my ugly shoes, and so I ended up buying a pair of shoes down there, and they were the crappiest pair of shoes I ever bought in my life, but they were nicer, and so I only wore them for conferences. And so I would definitely say, 2 pairs of really good, comfortable shoes that'll last for forever, and then just one nicer pair of flats that you can wear for conferences, and so you can feel pretty, because the only days I cared about what I looked like was on conference days when I was going to be taking a ton of pictures and seeing all of my old friends and everything. So that's what I would recommend for shoes. And then, everyone has different hairstyles or whatever. Just know your hair and just remember it's going to be humid, so do the best you can with your hair. I would definitely say not to dye it before you go, because that's just going to be a hassle, and it's really expensive to do that kind of stuff down there. I only got one haircut while I was down there, but I talked to everybody and they said it was going to be like 50 pesos to get a haircut, but then I found a pair of scissors that was 50 pesos, and so one of the sisters in my apartment actually knew how to cut hair, and so I just bought the scissors and had her cut it for me. But so you got to keep that in mind, like all of the upkeep and everything. But really, for clothes, just make sure it's simple and comfortable, because you are representing Christ. You do need to look nice, but you have to be comfortable as well. So just do some nice elastic skirts and just make sure they're long enough so you can, have breeze and everything when it's hot. And definitely take down tights and leggings, because in the winter, they're your best friend. And get the thicker kind, not the super thin ones. That are going to actually keep you warm in the winter. But I forgot to take a pair of pantyhose that were my skin color, and so I needed them for a conference, and the only kind I could find down there were white, and I'm pretty light skinned, but they were even whiter than me, and so it just completely didn't match, and I was so embarrassed to wear these, and I never wore them again. So just make sure you have a lot of good, stockings and tights and everything that are going to keep you warm in the winter. And then your jacket, it just says in the book that they send you just to get a really good waterproof layered jacket. And I had a companion that got the right kind, and I was so jealous of her the entire time, because if it was cold but not rainy, she would just take the inner layer so it wasn't as bulky, but she was still really warm. And then when it rained, she would just throw on the waterproof outer layer. And then it was perfect for her. And what I was really envious of was that when it was rainy in the summer, when it was really hot, it would rain for 10-20 minutes, and then the sun would be shining for 2 hours, and then when it would rain again. And so you're just hot and humid and sticky and disgusting, and you just feel gross. And so it's really nice to have that kind of a jacket, because it's not a warm jacket, it's just waterproof. So you could have the waterproof jacket on when it rains and then take it off when it's not, and then you're not all sticky and gross like I was the whole time. So I was really envious of her. So just make sure it's really versatile and you can use it for different, instances. And then waterproof boots are super important, because when it rains there, it rains and the streets flood, and it's like a muddy, gross lake through all the streets, because all the streets are dirt anyways. And so my boots I actually found on sale. They were Echo boots, and they were waterproof, and they were perfect. But I had a bunch of companions that just wore rain boots that were just nicer and just not patterned, just black rain boots, and that worked out really well for them too. But just make sure that they're waterproof and that they're warm, because in the winter your feet are going to get so cold. So just make sure that your feet are warm, because then if your feet are uncomfortable, you're going to be uncomfortable the whole day. And one day I didn't wear the right kind of socks, and I was freezing the entire day, and I was shivering the entire day, and it was just a miserable day. And then just beanies to keep your head warm. Just make sure you have everything for cold winters and really hot summers, and then you should be good to go. I think another kind of less challenging problem that I found down there was the weather, because there were it totally depends on the time of year, but there were some crazy monsoons I went through, and you can't just sit indoors and do nothing while there's rain outside, and so we had to keep working. And so it seriously we were walking through this like courtyard one time, and like branches off of trees were falling because it was so windy and so rainy, and I swear there was lightning. And we were just walking through the streets trying to clap at doors, and people would open their window and be like, "You're crazy, go home." And they would just close the doors. And we were like, "Wait, we thought you were supposed to like invite us into your house to get us off of the rainy streets," but it kind of had a backfire effect. And so that was definitely a struggle, was trying to just keep working through the crazy weather, or if it's like, 120 degrees and you're wearing these black clothes and everything, just trying to find the strength to move forward and just keep knocking on doors. The weather can be super crazy, and not like, I seriously were some days I just didn't want to leave the apartment and I didn't want to go work because I was so tired, and I was just like, it's raining outside or it's super hot, and it was just so hard. But one thing I realized after the fact was that even though I like thought those things, after I got past those crazy weather times, I guess, I realized that I didn't fully realize what was happening and how big of a challenge it was, because I got through it. I kept pushing forward, and I got to the point where I just didn't even realize or care if it was super hot and super humid. I just kept working because I knew I had a job to do. And because of that, I swear the Spirit like helped regulate my body, and so I wasn't feeling the full effects of the weather or something, because I seriously didn't even feel the effects of it later, and I didn't even care. And even though I was walking through a monsoon, I just had a smile on my face, and I was so excited to go meet people and try to teach them about Jesus Christ, So it's interesting that the Spirit can help you with anything, and it was so amazing to feel the Spirit so much in my mission. Okay, so this wasn't me, but with my companion, yes, we had a crazy animal story. So we went out on Refuerzos. I don't even know how to say that in English. It's where a bunch of missionaries from the entire zone come together, and we all just go out through one area and just contact like crazy. And so the missionaries in that area get a ton of potential investigators, and so the work just like flourishes for that time, So it was our turn to do it in our area. And so we all split up and we were all going out. And then my companion and I were knocking on a door, and while we were talking to this girl, she was like a young teenage girl, their dog comes out and pees on my companion's leg. And she was like, "That's awesome." And so the girl wasn't even gonna like help us out to clean it or anything. And so eventually we convinced her to like get us a towel so we could try to wipe off, everything that was happening. She wasn't interested, we moved on. And then probably like a half an hour later, we were knocking on this guy's door and we were talking to him, and he seemed really interested. He seemed like an awesome guy, and we were talking to him. And as we were leaving, after we talked to him, his dog comes out and bites my companion. And we were freaking out. We're like, "Oh my gosh, what just happened?" Because I'm sure he could like smell the pee and everything. And so we were freaking out. We called the elders and we're like, "What do we do?" Like, a dog just bit her. And the rule is if you get bit by a dog, you have to go to the hospital and get a rabies shot and everything. But it hadn't actually broken the skin. But we had to meet up with the elders to make sure she didn't have to go to the hospital or anything. And so she was like limping because she just got bit by this huge dog. But so we didn't have to go to the hospital, so we just kept working. She's like, "No, I am doing this. I'm not going home." And I was like, "You need to go home and rest." And she was just so determined. It was her first transfer. She was a little greenie, and she was so amazing and so enthusiastic about the work. She was like, "I don't care. I am going to ignore my bite, and we're just going to keep doing this," because the missionaries all came over to help our area, So I'm like, "All right, I'm leaving it up to you." And so we kept going, and then probably 10 minutes later, another dog peed on her, and she was like, "Okay, I give up. This is just not a good day for me." She's like, "I'm going back." And so we like met up with the missionaries and just went back to our chapel, and she was just like, "This was a very interesting day for me." So it was just so funny, and we still joke about that, how she had a crazy dog day. It was just the entire day dogs were just attacking her, and it was so funny. The biggest piece of advice I would have to say is read your scriptures every day. I don't have an awesome scripture study every day. Most of the time I'm just reading a couple of verses, but that is what's going to keep you going. After you think when you're on the mission, you're going to go home and life's going to be great because you can do whatever you want and you get to make your own decisions, make your own schedule. It's not as glamorous as it sounds, but you have to do it. And so reading the scriptures is what's kept me going through the years, of being home. And even when life is so hard, the scriptures is what strengthens me. So that's probably the biggest thing I would say. I know a lot of return missionaries that have become inactive, and it always starts with them stopping to read the Book of Mormon. I was about to say that in Spanish. They just don't read the book as much anymore. And so that's the biggest thing. Even if you can't do an amazing study every day, read the Book of Mormon every day. And that's what's going to keep your testimony strong and keep you going in the gospel. And then for missionaries that learned a foreign language, I would definitely say keep up on your language, whether it's reading your scriptures in your foreign language or, you know, meeting up with people that know that same language. I have been able to keep up on my Spanish because, well, a couple of my brothers speak Spanish, so I talk with them sometimes. And then I work in a restaurant, and most of the people in the kitchen and in the back, they're all Mexicans, and so I talk with all of them in Spanish. And I've actually been able to use it fairly often in my life, and so I'm always really, really glad that I remember the Spanish, because I know a lot of missionaries that stop studying it and they've just lost it, and so it's really hard for them to talk to members that they taught, you know, down there, and they can't talk to people and teach like they used to, and so they really regret not keeping up on the foreign language. So that's another big one, I think. And then just continue being excited about the work and never stop trying to share your testimony or, you know, share the gospel with other people, even though it can be really hard, especially being in Utah. Like, it's really a struggle for me up here, but I do as much as I can, and I use like social media, and I just do the best I can to be a part of the missionary efforts, even if it's just with like family history. That's still very important, you know. So just keep up on the excitement of the mission, and then just don't be lazy. Just remember all of the amazing things you learned on your mission, especially like the schedule and the discipline. Remember that, and don't just like ignore it, and just be glad that you can finally relax and sleep in. Like, keep going with it, and it'll really help you later in life. All right, so pre-mission advice. I would say stick to what the mission packet says of what things you need. Like, I studied that thing like crazy, and I had my highlighters out, and I was like marking off everything once I got it. But stick to what it says, because they know where you're going. They've sent hundreds of missionaries there before, so just trust the church, and definitely try to find other people that have gone to your area. But like, for instance, with mine, it said that I needed a jacket that had like 2 layers with like a zipper thing. So one was like a waterproof layer and then just a warm layer. I couldn't find those, and so I got this huge like pea coat that was like to the floor and everything. It wasn't the best thing to have down there. It did keep me warm, but when it rained, it just got soaking wet and it was super heavy. So I would definitely say do the best you can to stick to the, you know, supplies and the clothes that they tell you to get, because they know what they're talking about. And it's always really good to talk to a lot of RMs, you know, about their mission and see what advice they have to give you. But honestly, everybody's mission is different. So I would just say, just pray the entire process. When you're preparing, just do everything you can to pour your heart out to the Lord, and just be like, okay, I'm here to serve you. Like, tell me what I need to do to prepare. So the biggest thing that was for me was, it's a really hard mission. Honestly, it's tough. Because of the culture and the traditions in that mission, it's a hard mission. So I would just say, don't get frustrated because you're not having as much success as people, you know, in Central America or whatever, where they baptize 1 million people a week. Don't be frustrated by that, because it's a hard mission. Just know that if you're doing everything you can to be a good missionary, that's all that the Lord expects of you. And just to remember to do your best. And what's frustrating about the mission is when you're not having success, you blame yourself. But when you are having success, you give all the credit to the Spirit. Like, you did nothing. You were just there, you know? And so, I mean, it's good to be hard on yourself to motivate you to work harder, but don't beat yourself up if you're not having all the success in the world, and just keep moving forward. Never lose hope, and always, you know, have that testimony and that hope that there is somebody out there that's looking for the gospel, and you are the person that's going to find them and help them to learn about all the happiness that is possible in the gospel. So just remember that it's hard, but it's so worth it. I wouldn't change it for anything.
I'd served in Salt Lake City as a missionary now, and I'd seen a completely different kind of mission, and now we're at a place where Zion's basically built, because Zion is everywhere. It's not necessarily one place, but a place where the church is so established and built, and I'm here in a place where it's not. I guess just anecdotes of getting there. It is about 12 to 13 hour plane flight. And when I got there for a second, like, I mean, my brain was kind of cloudy from so much flying, and not too much jet lag. It's only about a 4 hour time difference, but a little bit. And I I remember getting off the plane and everyone sounded like they were yelling. The Argentine accent's kind of loud. It sounds a little bit like Italian, probably more like Italian than it does like Spanish. But I could understand people and I could communicate a little bit. And after I got a little bit more used to it, after, a couple hours of that and realizing that actually was the way they were going to talk the entire time I was there, because I don't know if I believed it. I thought everybody was kind of pretending. I didn't really. I guess Spanish was more of a parlor trick. But I remember helping everybody get their documents. I was the only one who spoke Spanish in the group going down. It was all the people I would have been in the MTC with. There was a volcano that erupted in Chile not too long before that, and the ash prevented us from flying to Bahia Blanca, so we drove down there in a bus, and it was all ashy and smoky. The land was like gray almost, not from ash falling on it, but just from it being in the sky and filtering out the sun and everything like that. But we got there, and my first area was a little. I was at my first area after 2 or 3 days. It took a while to get out there. It was a little town called Bigway, and it was an old German colony. So I kind of fit right in with my last name and my fair complexion and everything. Well, German and French, I guess. But yeah, then at first I didn't really know how to process everything. I decided to just, one, enjoy the place I was in. For how beautiful it is, and 2, for the people, that I was supposed to learn to love, for everything about them. And I didn't know much about them, so that was kind of my first footsteps into that. Well, the Bahia Blanca mission is kind of the final frontier for Argentina as far as like the north goes to the south. Argentina is a really big country. If you stretch it out, top to bottom, it's probably the difference between New York and Los Angeles, like the whole length of our country. It's definitely not as wide or as big, and there's only about 48 million people to our 325 in the United States. But the Bahia Blanca mission itself is probably about the size of Texas. It's fairly big. Most of that, or a good portion of that, is in a province called La Pampa, which is you can't say uninhabited because there are people there and farms and all kinds of things going on, but the church hasn't reached the farthest western end of the mission. There are, I think, branches, but they even belong to bigger districts that are in the Mendoza mission or the Neuquén mission. There's a little called Catriel on the very border, but it's on the border of the Pampa and a province called Rio Negro, but the saints gather there on the Rio Negro side so that they can be closer to a mission president in Neuquén rather than very far away in Bahia Blanca. There are actually some stakes. There are 2 in Bahia Blanca. There's 1 in La Pampa and Santa Rosa. They are making one in between 2 cities called Olavarria and Tandil that are in the center of the province of Buenos Aires. I should mention there are 3 provinces in the mission, pieces of 3 provinces in all of the Pampa. So there's pieces of Provincia de Buenos Aires, probably most of the province, it belongs to the Bahia Blanca mission, and then a tiny bit of Rio Negro in a place called Viedma. But there are 2 stakes in Bahia Blanca. There's 1 in La Pampa, like I said. There's 1 in the middle of Buenos Aires that has 2 big cities called Olavarria and Tandil. And then over on the eastern coast, probably the most famous, iconic part of the mission as far as the world is concerned, is a city called Mar del Plata, which is kind of the vacation spot of Argentina as far as beaches go. It's a city of a little more than 1 million people, and it has 2 stakes. It was pushing for 3, and they're kind of in between doing it. It's got a lot of interesting challenges. I served there for about 6 months, but yeah. So if the mission ever does divide, it'll probably divide between Bahia Blanca and Mar del Plata. of course, there would need to be a few more stakes for that to happen. They talked a lot about what would need to. As soon as I got there, my first mission president would talk to us about what would need to happen for there to be a temple, and he would project it into into 10 years. And he said, but if we have an attitude of we can have a temple in 5 years, then we can have one in 10 years. If we have an attitude of we're going to have a temple in 15 years, then it'll be a few decades before we ever have a temple. And that vision is very important to have in Argentina. The church is fairly new. I mean, there's only 2 temples in the country. But there are 4 million potential candidates for exaltation in the Bahia Blanca mission, and enough of those working towards that with their covenants and everything, if they were to be baptized and the men were to be righteous priesthood holders and full tithe payers, then they would be considered for a temple. Especially, I mean, Bahia Blanca, like I said, its geographic position is advantageous for having a temple for the southernmost inhabitants of Argentina, and also for ones that live right around there. There are quite a few. There would just, need to be enough if you're going to build a temple, and you have to be ready for it. But that's kind of how the work is going right now. My first mission president actually finished his mission a year into my mission, and the mission president that I had for the second half of my mission, Manuel Parreño, is still there. He's from Spain, and he and his wife, and I think a year from now, or maybe a little bit less, I believe it's in June, is when I got there, 3 years ago. So I've been back for a while now, but yeah. If you're going between cities, they have these big double-decker buses called colectivos that you would go between cities in, which it's an adventure. Eventually it becomes kind of a pain by the end of your mission, having to bus everywhere. But really it's a nostalgic thing for me now, as I've gone back and everything. The colectivos are everything like that, and they have colectivos in the city too, little buses that'll go around to different parts of the city. But Mar del Plata is probably the only city I lived in that had the bus system reliable enough, and it was big enough that we used them. If we were going to different areas for meeting with leaders or doing this or that, we would generally take a bus, and we could take one close to different chapels or to wherever we were going. Mar del Plata looks a lot like what you would see of Brazil on television, or any other media, encyclopedias or whatever. They have a very, very beautiful beachfront city going on, lots of hotels during the tourist season, and so there's always surfing competitions there. The beach is covered in vendors and all that kind of stuff. It's actually not forbidden for missionaries to go to the beach in the winter, as long as they have permission to be there and everything like that. And there's always, regardless of it's being season or not, there's always someone on the beach selling something or doing this or that. It's a very, very beautiful city. Around the middle of the city has a lot of English influence in the architecture of the cathedrals and the older buildings, and also some French and German and Italian influence. Lots of immigrants came to Mar del Plata, and it kind of grew later than a lot of these other cities in Argentina, but now it's fairly modern. The part that I was in, however, is where the less affluent neighborhoods were pushed out of, or where they were pushed to when this beautiful city went up. Because, kind of a sad fact of Argentina as far as its being second world is that there are people who live at a poverty level. And if you see all those videos of Brazil where there's just hills, where there's just houses or of cardboard or cement for miles and miles and miles, that is also something that happens in Mar del Plata. Not quite as big as Rio de Janeiro or Sao Paulo, but kind of have that. It's not called a favela. The kind of poorer areas, they're called bichas, which is a shorter name for bicha miseria, which means the house of poverty, but is affectionately the affectionate name for these places where the less fortunate live. We actually did live in the middle of one. Most people, if I told them my address while I lived in Mar del Plata, would have told me that it wasn't a place that I should be living. We lived in a cooperative apartment, kind of a gated community thing going on, where I definitely felt safe. We had security guards and stuff around the house. And I guess just kind of swallowing the pride and deciding that, it's safe enough as far as going to teach people around those areas. There were definitely some places I didn't want to be at night. And I never was assaulted, but I did get fairly violently robbed. Of course, if you're passive and attent and things like that, nothing bad ever really happens. It's very uncommon. I mean, I carried just a little bit of money to give to people, and almost never carried money other than that to give to people if they were to rob me. And I only ever got robbed 2 or 3 times. But yeah, so most people will get on a bus out of that place in the Villa, and they'll go out to close to the port or to the centro, the city center, and they'll work doing something down there. There's a lot of tourism, like I said, and there's a lot of fishing as well in Mar del Plata. And it's probably the only part of my mission where I had fish, but I, like fish, so that was good. There was, the church was pretty well established there. Members were kind of divided up into pockets, because someone will get baptized and they'll tell their neighbors about it, and they're able to say, hey, this is great, and they'll go to church together. And kind of that social conversion is definitely a real thing. In areas like that, especially where people, are very friendly, regardless of how much, even especially living at that level where a lot of them don't have a lot, they really band together to be almost like family in a neighborhood. And when someone's, accepting the gospel in your family, you're at least a little bit curious, or if you're the one accepting the gospel, you want to share it with everyone. So definitely the social ties there really helped as far as people finding and accepting the gospel and generally doing it. But I was actually training then. So, a typical day would have been wake up, and I would, my companion and I would get ready, we would study. We'd study the scriptures first, or preach my gospel independently for personal study. At that time, I was doing a lot of preach my gospel. I don't remember if I was a leader yet. I think I was I was a district leader. I would have had to been. I'm pretty sure I was giving district meetings. But I would study a lot of preach my gospel, which is a blessing. You should always be studying preach my gospel for your entire mission. And then I had the blessing of being with a new companion who had to study the language. So we would study the language together, and I would study a lot of vocabulary. I had a dictionary of Argentine words. They have almost their own language in an area like that, where the people are, I wouldn't say less educated. The literacy rate is actually really high in Argentina. It's higher than the U.S., I'm pretty sure. Kind of socialism definitely makes sure people at least know how to read. But because they did live in a very, kind of a less opportunities, their language was very Argentine, and it was very different than any other kind of Spanish you would hear. So I would study a lot of that. I had kind of decided to forsake my neutral Spanish or my Mexican accent for the time being, so that people would understand me, to better speak the language of the mission. Of course, you don't want to learn just a lot of slang and be using that all the time, but I would just kind of colloquialisms and the way people talk and being able to relate to people better was definitely a blessing to have more time to study the language. And I studied actually until the end of my mission, until the very last day. Almost every single day of my mission, I studied the language. But after language study, we'd have an hour of companionship study, and then we'd have an hour of like training sessions, which sometimes they do with like a DVD player. I don't think we had one there, but we definitely did a lot of practices, and my companion elder Yost, who was new to the mission, would practice all kinds of stuff, and he taught me a ton of things. That was just right around the time where they changed the MTC times, and new missionaries definitely come in with a lot of new knowledge, I guess, from their training and everything like that. And he definitely he couldn't speak very well, but he definitely knew what he needed to know to get going, and I would help him along. So we had that for those two transfers, and the second of those transfers, I spoke a lot of Spanish to him, and I would. We always spoke Spanish in the streets, but I would help him less if he was getting lost or stuck talking to people or things like that. I would make him talk on the phone, and a lot of other things for him to be able to do it. But he got really good at Spanish. He definitely learned to be Argentine a lot faster than I did. That's kind of something you learn in the mission, that the newer missionaries are better because you share everything that you learn, not because people told you, but because they're things you learned. And he definitely got the benefit from that, and I'm pretty sure he trained 4 or 5 times, an excellent missionary. And all of those missionaries got the benefit of him having learned so much, not because I told him, but because of his own experience. But then I guess, we'd after study go out and work. We'd be working until about 1 or 2, which is when a member would give us lunch. Lunch is the big meal in Argentina, and they usually take a nap after. It's kind of like government-sanctioned nap time called la siesta, and it's the bane of missionaries' existence if they can't study during it, but we could not, so we would go out and work. And if you really believe that there are people that can be awake, then there are people that can be awake. It was a little bit hard in the winter when it was raining, or people were just kind of shut up, but usually there was someone awake sipping mate or watching television or something, and we could find someone to teach. And definitely having the advantage of being different looking. I mean, it didn't help for security reasons, being different looking and standing out, but it definitely helped for at least creating a little bit of interest for people to talk to us. Well, we'd go through the afternoon after lunch, through the siesta, into the nighttime. If we had any meetings, we'd go to those at about 6 or 7, and then at about 8 or 9, we would be headed for the apartment. We tried to get to the apartment at 9 o'clock, 9:30 at the latest. Days, when it was winter and it was darker, sometimes we'd be there a little bit earlier, or we just try to stay out of not very well lit or not very reputable areas, and we'd come home, plan. If we did eat dinner, we'd eat it then. I didn't eat a lot of dinner. I usually eat a snack before bedtime, but and then get ready for bed and go to bed, kind of thing. Wake up and do it all over again until Sunday, when you're worrying about people getting to church and everything like that. But yeah, I guess we'll mention the bad first, then we'll go to the good, because Argentine food is amazing. It's delicious. It's the kind of the Italian food of Latin America. Everybody outside of Mexico actually doesn't eat tortillas or know what they are. Tortilla is a word for omelet in Spain and Argentina and most of South America. People understand what they are if they've been to Mexico, but it's not quite the Mexican food that you're imagining, probably, if you're going to go to Latin America. But they do have what Latin America has, in that they eat every part of the cow. And I have eaten probably every part of the cow. There's not too many things that, if they're not prepared in the right way, that if they were to be prepared in the right way, would still be, absolutely repulsive. They're not my favorite, obviously, but there's something that you can definitely eat. I never refused food the entire time I was there, and I never really got sick from food that was given to me. Mostly because people know, the Argentine people know, they have kind of a simple palette of flavors, but they're really good at the 2 or 3 flavors that they're really into. Some of my favorite stuff down there has to do with meat and pasta. It's very traditional for parties and a lot of other things in Argentina to have asado. That just means grilled, but they're talking about meat and a bunch of other things. It takes a really long time. They'll get firewood together. It's kind of a mesquite smelling wood, and they'll burn it. And the coals they will then use to cook meat for 3 or 4 hours. But it's the best meat you'll ever have in your life. It's really, really good. The meat there is the beef is very good, and so is the pork. Just the quality, I mean, almost everything is farm raised. And very, very delicious. Pasta dishes, they have a ton. If you're into tortellini, they have capelliti that are really good. They have all kinds of spaghetti, and they put all kinds of different stuff in that. They'll put little pieces of meat. They look like little steak chunks in there. That's really good. They have sausages that are called chorizos that they'll chop up and put in the spaghetti, or sometimes they'll serve that at the asado. So you have these sausages that are really good. They do have some more adventurous European things. There's a morcilla. That's a blood sausage. Again, everything it's prepared. If it's prepared well, it's very, very delicious. I never refuse anything like that, and it won't make you sick. But it's I actually well, it wasn't crazy about the texture, but the flavor was good for the blood sausage. The as they kind of get away from the Italian influence in the pastas and everything, they have milanesas that are kind of breaded pieces of meat, kind of like a country fried steak, but they could be anything. I mean, they could be beef, or they could be chicken, or they could be pork. I knew some people that did horse. Horse is not as ghoulish or terrible as it sounds. I mean, they just want to use every animal they can. Is more sweet tasting than anything. Kind of tasted like the grass that the horse eats. So I mean that's there. It doesn't have a lot of fat or anything, and you'd probably never be able to tell if you were new and couldn't speak Spanish, and they probably wouldn't tell you either. But then as far as I mean, they kind of have this savory and then sweet. They have really good desserts as well. They have a lot of French and German influence. They have really good pastries. They have these breakfast pastries called facturas that are really delicious. They're made with making my mouth water. They're kneaded with butter into the dough. I've made most of this stuff with members or as I've come back. The secret to all Argentine food is the problem is time. So I don't always have the time here to live like that as much as I'd like to. They will knead butter into the dough and make these they'll make them into croissant rolls, or they'll make them into little balls and fill them with dulce de leche, which is really famous in Argentina. It's kind of a caramel dessert that it's just really good. They have dulce de membrillo. It's kind of another fruit, kind of a tropical fruit they have down there. It's red. That's really good on pastries as well, and they have all kinds of desserts. And their ice cream is kind of a gelato, kind of an Italian. They have a big brand on there called Grido that is at least in my mission was pretty famous among all the missionaries for enjoying on days of baptism or on days of celebration, milestones, those kind of things. There's definitely time to do that kind of stuff in between appointments or whatever you're doing. There's, a lot of walking involved. So didn't worry too much about gaining weight. And the last thing are the snack foods, which are also good, but they're very different. They're a little more European. They have these alfajores, which are little cookies and cakes. That they have about 1,000 flavors, and they're all very, very delicious. You can actually find them here if you're looking in Latino markets. They're really expensive, but down there they're not so expensive, so that's good. And last thing about consumption, the water is generally okay to drink. Not so much in most parts of La Pampa or the cities that aren't fairly well established. And depending on what part of the city you live in, it could not be very good to drink. I would really recommend drinking. They give these big water coolers. The missionaries usually buy and get reimbursed for these big water coolers of purified water, which is much better for your health if you're a foreigner, regardless if you're Argentine or if you're Latino or American. It's different bacteria. It's different in a lot of things. It's not, in a lot of cases, it's not dirty. It kind of shocks your system if you were to drink too much of that. And I mean, don't have to worry. Everyone sits around for most of the day drinking mate, which is kind of an herbal tea. And they will just pass it around and they'll all drink from the same straw and everything like that. You don't have to worry about that because missionaries aren't allowed to. So if you see a missionary do that, no, like, you're not supposed to. At least not in my Blanca mission. And most of my friends who've been to Argentina have been in. Everyone's pretty much in agreement that you're not supposed to, I guess, at this point, sit around with people and drink mate, mostly for the health concerns. I don't think it's not against the word of wisdom or anything like that. So no, don't. It's not a sin or anything. Just more of an obedience thing for missionaries. So today it would probably cost $2,000 or $3,000 per person to get to Argentina, and then $2,000 or $3,000 to come back. Probably a little bit less to come back. I'm not exactly sure about that. You will probably, if you live in Utah, fly out of I flew out of Dallas Fort Worth, which is also the one I flew out of when I first went to the mission field. And flew back. When I had flown back from the mission field, I flew back to Atlanta. We flew back to Miami this time, which I'm told is a lot more common. If you meet a lot of people that are in Argentina, have family in Florida. The Latino community is really, really big there. So a lot of people fly to Miami, and I think that flight is a lot more common for American Airlines to do. American Airlines is usually the airline that flies in between the two. You have to fly into Buenos Aires almost unconditionally from America. But from there, I mean, they have Ezeiza, which is the international airport, and the domestic airport that's Aeroparque Jorge Newbery, which is really, I mean, it's actually convenient. You get to go into the city of Buenos Aires, and I would definitely, if anyone goes there, recommend seeing that. I mean, it's a world-famous city. It's kind of, they call it the Paris of South America. And that part of the city is very pretty and very beautiful and well-kept and everything like that. And there's definitely a lot to see. I mean, I went twice while I was there, once when I got there and once when I came back, and still didn't see everything that I wanted to see in Buenos Aires. It's just too much to see in just 1 or 2 days. But any amount of time that you could spend there, you definitely should. I mean, it's kind of the cultural hub for Argentina, and maybe the people aren't quite as salt of the earth as other parts of Argentina you might have served in, but yeah, it's a good experience. From there, I would say I kind of went backpacker style. For food and everything, I probably kept my costs. Food and travel, as far as like buses go, probably kept my costs a little bit under $500. Well, no, for just me, I mean, it had to be under 3 or 2, honestly. Closer to 1,000 when I added a couple flights in. I flew to the north and then to Cordoba, and then I took a bus from Cordoba to La Pampa, and then worked my way over to Mar del Plata, and then in Mar del Plata I took a flight to the south, and then a flight back from the south to Buenos Aires. If you're traveling to the far north or the far south from Buenos Aires, it really is worth flying, because bus rides were long, I'm sure. The longest one I did on my mission was probably 13 or 14 hours, but we're talking like days here. If you're going to the far north or the far south, it's a lot of time, and you'd probably lose most of your time for seeing the country and for seeing the people you want to see and everything like that if you spend a lot of it in colectivos, but or in buses, I guess, colectivos if you're going back. There's definitely a lot to see in Argentina. Like I said, I went to the north to see Iguazu, and the south to see Perito Moreno. It's a really famous glacier. It's been in equilibrium for a long time. We walked around on it and stuff. It was really cool. But Argentina has a ton of natural beauty and a ton of basically wonders of the world. So, I mean, if you do go back, that's maybe seeing one of those things is something you want to do, depending on how many people you have with you. I would say per person, like I said, between $200 and $300 for all the bus travel and food and things you do. The conversion rate is actually probably more than 10 to 1 now, which is what the Mexican peso was when I was in elementary school. The Mexican peso is up to 20 now, but I mean, that's a lot of money, and 100 pesos can not quite buy what it did before, but it can buy a significant amount, probably $50 worth of stuff. So, I mean, that's $10 for $50 worth of good stuff in Argentina, either food or I got a lot of jewelry and stuff for my my mother and for some future lucky young lady. But and definitely there's a lot to be seen and experiences to be had. As far as going to my mission, I found that I could stay with members if I gave them enough time in advance. It was just me alone. If I had been with one other person, it probably still would have been possible. More than that, probably not. Their houses aren't that big. And unless you have a fairly wealthy contacts in every city you're going to in Argentina, I wouldn't recommend that. Everybody wants to feed you a lot. Everybody's really excited that you can drink mate now. I did drink it, tried to make sure they got the water at least boiling. I only think I ever got sick from some tepid mates, but the people were always really happy to receive me, and I realized, I mean, the one tip I would have for myself going back is just don't try to see everybody, because if you're on a time schedule, you probably won't, which is sad. You're so close, you didn't get to see them, but people that make a genuine effort to see you and you make a genuine effort to see them, it'll always happen. Make sure you have contact before with those people that you just absolutely have to see. As far as converts go, I had a lot of them that were less active when I came back, a fair amount. And I would just ask them if they were going to church. You're not a missionary anymore, like a full-time missionary, but I kind of had a couple moments where I was like, yeah, I mean, you're not going to church, and I bet you never thought you would see me again, but here I am. And my message is the same. I mean, I love you, and I know that you going to church is the most important thing. But another thing, I mean, I went with a family that hadn't been going to church for about 6 months, and it was a real coup when the hermano, the dad, got baptized and everything, and he was, worried about this or that, about having not having gone to church. And I did bring little gifts to everyone. And one thing I brought to almost all my converts was a little sleeve for their temple recommend. And I would say, like, when you do have a temple recommend, this is where you want to put it. And I want you to be reminded that your temple recommend comes from Christ, and that it comes from your own efforts, and it doesn't come from any reason that you are inactive or less active. I don't know, fight with the branch president or another member of the church, or just laziness or this or that. And it's worth it to have an eternal family. And, people were genuinely surprised that I made it all the way back there. And I would tell them, I don't want to be surprised to see you in the celestial kingdom. I mean, I would like to, I don't know if I'll ever see you again in this life, but I don't want to be surprised that you're there. I want you to actually make the decisions now or as soon as you can to get your life back in order and get back on the path. But really, if I had any advice for seeing people, it would be just that one, don't try to to see everybody or to see everything, because it's just almost impossible unless you're spending a month down there. Remember, those are people you met over the course of 2 years of your life. I mean, it's not like you met everybody in the same day and saw them all every day of your life. But there are definitely people that it's worth it to see, make sure you're in contact with them, and you're always finding them well. I mean, as long as they have their health, a lot of things. I mean, they might be going through trials in their life and everything, but you're always finding them well because you're seeing them again. So definitely, I mean, you celebrate the moment, you invite them to do whatever they have to do. And I mean, the invitation for everybody to me was to get married, and I said, oh, work on that, and they said, oh, well, can't really be telling people to go to church if you're not obeying the commandments. And I said, oh, I guess you got me there. But yeah, I mean, it's a really amazing experience. I'm very, very grateful, and then kind of a miracle that I was able to do it at all. But it's a really amazing thing. Do you have any more questions about?
How long was it? Was it a week or two? Or?
It was 13 days. 13 days in Argentina, and then probably about 2 of travel.
Perfect.
Because it takes about a day to get there, a day to get back.
What was craziest food you had in Argentina?
Craziest food that's an animal. It was called peludo. It was like an armadillo. It was a big hairy armadillo. But they served it cold in what's called an escabeche in like vinegar and stuff. Craziest part of the cow was called tripa gorda, and it's anus. It wasn't too terrible. When they told me what it was, I decided not to tell my companion what it was until later. But yeah, a little fatty.
What was one of the most crazy or dangerous experiences you had?
Probably the second time I got robbed. I was on a colectivo, a bus, and a gentleman asked me for a coin. I told him I didn't have any coins, but I gave him one of those little pass-along cards that has Jesus on it. And he said, "Oh, thank you." And then he leaned over and said, "Hey, I'm not joking. Like, give me your money or I'm going to kill you." And I said, "I don't know." Like, I just kind of turned around, pretended like I didn't hear it, and he started whispering to me a bunch of profanities. And then told me that he was going to get off the bus and shoot me. And I, probably shouldn't have done this, but I reasoned with him and said, if you were asking me for a coin because you don't have money, like, how do you have money for a gun and bullets? And made him really mad. It was a holiday, so nobody else was on the bus, and he was just screaming at me. And then my companion turned around because he wanted to see what was going on. And I just told him in English, like, just turn back around. Don't look at this guy. And he asked for my belt, my shoes, and a lot of other things. But yeah, I mean, I'd never really there's danger, but you just got to be attentive.
What's one of the most important spiritual lessons or life lessons you learned on your mission?
I learned more so than that the gospel speaks every language. That the gospel speaks every language. I found out that it really speaks to every kind of person in all kinds of different walks of life, that it really is for everyone. And if it seems like people are kind of uniform in the church, it's just because the blessings are uniform for everyone. Everybody gets the blessings, temporal blessings and spiritual blessings from being a member of the church. And maybe second or third generation don't really know that those blessings come to them just because of a tradition of serving God and of being the best person you can be. But even people who are in really humble circumstances, you can have the vision for them and their children to have all the blessings, maybe not all the temporal blessings that you and your family have, but almost everything and definitely everything they need for not just a good life, but an amazing life.
Awesome. What's one of the greatest skills you gained?
Besides really mastering Spanish and loving Spanish, I think being able to relate to people, not just talk to them, but talk with them and converse and really get to know someone and communicate on a level that's a lot higher than talking about the weather or sports or trying to find common ground, but really communicating my own hopes, desires, fears, a lot of other things, emotions, things that you maybe wouldn't talk about, and listening to theirs and understanding them, which has helped me in my relationships with my family and with friends and romantic relationships as I come back from the mission.
What was one of the most spiritual experiences you had?
Um, so about 6 months into my mission, I baptized almost every week in Salt Lake, and they've just made it kind of a point in a place like that you baptize every week. And obviously, it's not about the numbers, but in a place where you can baptize a ton, you kind of do it for the numbers as well, because you should. I mean, if you can harvest that much, then you should kind of glorify God. As far as Argentina goes, though, the church was a little bit newer and it's different in Latin America. I hadn't baptized anybody up to the 6 month part of my mission. And I remember just an awful day where we almost had nobody to teach. And at the very end of the day, we went and you clap in Argentina to get people to come to the door, and the house looked almost abandoned. And a lady came out who was obviously an immigrant. She was from Bolivia. It didn't talk like an Argentine or look like one. And we talked to her, and I just very almost desperately said, "Hey, we have a message about Jesus Christ. Please let us in so we can talk to you about it because it will change your life." And she told us yes. She went to church a little while after that lesson and really enjoyed it. And I got transferred. And as I was getting transferred, she told me that she had actually just left Bolivia. Her husband had been murdered by some drug cartel kind of people. He'd been involved in some shady business, and so she escaped with her family to Argentina to find the only other family she had, I think, was her mother. And she told me that it really, really made the difference in her life. And I might not be able to even fill up a page with the amount of people that I helped get baptized, but I know all their names and all their stories, and I know Sandra very well because my companion and I were willing to, first of all, knock on or clap at a house that looked like it was abandoned, and also teach this woman in her patio because there were no men inside. We couldn't go inside, and also kind of go out our way to help her to get to church. And it made the difference for her and her family, realizing that maybe if I had been a little bit less faithful, another missionary would have been given that opportunity. But kind of God's plan definitely does exist and is known to the faithful missionary, to someone who will really try to be a part of it.
Cool. What was craziest weather you experienced?
So when I lived in La Pampa, I lived there for almost a year in my mission, just on and off, 6 months in a city called General Pico and 6 months in a city called Santa Rosa. It would get in this weird pattern for the weeks in the summer where it would be really just blazing hot at the beginning of the week, and it'd get really humid in the middle of the week, and then by like Saturday, Sunday, it would just start pouring rain, and that was really frustrating in some parts because almost every Sunday it rained, and Argentines are of the urban legend that rain will make them melt or give them cancer or something like that, and they won't go out in the rain. So even some longtime members would miss church because it was raining. But that definitely, just the fact that it would happen, it seemed, every Saturday and Sunday. I think sometimes I would pray and say, I know this might not be like the most righteous desire and it won't help people progress, but can it please not rain on Saturday and Sunday? So we can give people to baptisms or to church this weekend, and it was just something you had to learn to deal with.
Let's see. What's the best piece of mission trip advice you could give?
If I guess it's kind of what I said a little bit earlier. Find out why you have a desire to serve, and understand your calling comes from you having a desire to serve. You can have a calling and go on a mission, and if you still don't really want to be there, you won't discover a lot of your purpose as a missionary until you're willing to do that. And that's especially important for elders, like I said, because it's an obligation for us, because God needs priesthood holders, and he needs heads of household. He needs all of the men in his church that are willing to obey any measure of the commandments to do this. But at the same time, you have to have that internal desire and do it for some kind of something inside you. Of course, the Spirit will help you find that, and Revelation's good for that. But yeah.
What's the thing you admire most about the people?
They're funny. They're very funny. And they've been through a lot of difficulties in the last 50 years as far as their government goes. Been in like kind of a police state or anything like that, but they're always finding things to laugh about. And it's kind of some people get really upset about it, that they're always making fun of this and that, but the fact that they can laugh at themselves and laugh at everything around them doesn't mean that they don't think anything's sacred. It definitely just means that they have found a really great way to deal with having a difficult existence and difficult survival as families, and it's definitely something that keeps them together and endears me to them, definitely.
Funniest language mistake.
So there's a word for bird, pájaro, that a lot of new missionaries get confused with. And I remember one time I was on exchanges with a very new missionary. He told me there were pajeros in the trees. And pajero is it really means someone who works with hay, but is a very vulgar representation of something else. So I tried to correct him, and he told me, no, I'm pretty sure it's pajero. And I told him, well, why don't you ask a member? He did, and they was fairly embarrassed when they laughed and told him not to say that. Also, the word for grab in a lot of Latin America is coger, but that's a really vulgar word in Argentina. It's taboo. You wouldn't hear it. I wouldn't hear it on TV even. If Argentine TV had, the censorship that America has, you would probably hear it on their TV. But
hardest experience you had, or one of the hardest?
I lived in a house with 3 missionaries, one that was a very good friend of mine and 2 others that were not so much good friends of mine, and it just seemed like there was always conflict in the house. And one of the hardest experiences I ever had was just praying to love one missionary in particular who really had it out for me. I don't know what it was, if it was jealousy or probably a lot of things that I was doing or other things, and I just had to pray for Heavenly Father to make me love Him, even if He drove me that insane, and did that. And it was a really humbling experience, because it didn't just take one prayer one day. It took a really long time, and believing that I could if I exercised enough faith and patience.
And then last question would be just, if you had best piece of advice you could give for someone just coming home from the mission, for a return missionary? Just
coming home from their mission? Maintain... there's a certain amount that you want to keep for your mission. There's a certain amount that you have to change because you're back in the world. The things that you definitely don't want to lose are your excitedness about the scriptures. You have a lot of other things you could be doing, and your love for serving. Definitely try to serve in any moment you can in the church, regardless of how annoying that is for people. In a place where there's a lot of return missionaries who probably want to do the same thing, because you should always have a desire to serve after, whether it's just missionary work or your home teaching or calling in church or do anything, do it with the same kind of zeal you did on your mission. The mission will change your life. It's like 2 years it's like an entire lifetime in 2 years, in a short 2-year period. My mission meant everything to me, as far as preparation goes. I mean, I've been preparing since I was 8 years old. I realized out there that I was really born to do it. And I think all all the young men in our church, regardless of their level of preparation when they get their call, were born to serve missions. It's not coincidence or just chance that they're in a position to serve and that they can make that decision. It really is providence. I know that as much as the mission changed my life, it only changed my life because I was worried about everybody else's life changing, either my companions or my the missionaries that I served as a leader, and any members that I talked to, but also all the people that especially all the people that I taught the gospel, that I tried to help understand the truth and happiness. There's a lot of things in this world that can give you pleasure, but very few that can give you a lasting happiness. And the mission is one of them. I know that that God loves us, and that His love is something that stretches through time and space to really reach all of His children. An important element of that is that a lot of times it's shared through His other children to His children, and becoming kind of that conduit for God's love and for really loving everybody around me. Being filled with charity is definitely the biggest challenge, and my biggest challenge as I come back. Always doing that, but also the most rewarding and the most timeless thing. I really do know that Christ lives because of those evidences of His love all over the place and in all of His servants. I love all of His missionaries. I love the opportunity to be one, and I love all of His missionaries. And I do bear testimony that this is His church. And I say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Well, it was insane because I was leaving the mission from a different mission and then going to Argentina. I flew in by myself, was completely traveling from the States to Argentina alone. I actually got there the same transfer as the people in my original district, which was kind of cool, but I arrived a day later than everyone, so I didn't get to see them. But I got there late one night in the evening, and my area that I was called to was the furthest point in the mission, so it was like an 8-hour bus ride. So basically I got there, they gave me a little package, and I met the mission president, and then they sent me on my way. And I had just come from St. George, and there it was summertime, so it was very green, and nice houses and sidewalks and all these things. And then the area that I first went to on mission, it's in the south. It's in Rio Negro, which is the most southern province of my mission, and it was right on the coast. So the area used to be under the ocean. So there's not much vegetation. So I got there, and it was just dirt as far as you can see. No grass, no trees. And then the houses were built out of dirt, and the roads are made out of dirt. Everything was just made out of dirt, and I couldn't believe it. There was just nothing green. Just the construction of houses is different. Everything is just so different. And I thought it was just a very topsy-turvy world. The only plants looked like underwater plants that were just not in the ocean but on land. And I remember, my first few months when I'd walk around, there'd be people outside watering their dirt yards. And I couldn't for the life of me figure out why they were watering their dirt yards. It just seemed so weird because there was no grass. Later I found out it's so that the wind doesn't blow the dirt into their houses, but it just seemed like a very strange place. It was also different because prior to me getting there hadn't been missionaries there for several months. And the missionary apartment needed lots of repairs. So my first week there, we spent in the house having people come over to fix the apartment and kind of organize the area. And as just freshly coming to the mission field, I was having a hard time because I wanted to go out, I wanted to preach, I wanted to teach, and we were trying to take care of all these other things. So that was hard. But it was just interesting of getting used to a new mission, a new culture, a new place. It was interesting trying to go into homes of people in Argentina just because the culture is so different. A lot of them don't even have screen doors, and so they just tear rags and hang it for their door as their door, just so that the flies don't come in. So that's interesting. You just walk and you can kind of see into everyone's home, and then when you go in, you just kind of walk through the torn rags. The houses are all very small. They're not they don't have a lot of money down there, so the houses are always very small. And usually there's just one room, kind of a central room that's not like the kitchen or a bedroom, where the table will be where they will eat their meals, but also watch TV or talk. So there's no couches. I remember thinking it's so strange that no one has couches and no one has carpet, just cement floors and a table in a small little room. But another thing that was interesting was they always have the TV on. So that was one of the original struggles of going in and teaching, trying to ask people to turn off their TVs, and they never turn it off, and that's just a very odd thing. Because usually they'll have conversations with friends, and the TV will just be noise in the background. So I remember when I was first there on the mission and didn't have the courage yet to just always say, or figure out how to say politely, "Can you turn off your TV?" I remember once I was teaching a lady and she kept looking at the TV screen, and it was annoying me so much because I felt like I was giving her this powerful sermon and she wasn't even really listening. So I went and stood right in front of the TV and so that she couldn't watch it. But it was just really interesting, all the nuances of the culture, and a lot of them were not conducive to teaching, just because they like to have the TV on, that as soon as you get there, they want to get up and start serving you mate or cookies or drinks or whatever, and you'll be talking, and then all of a sudden they just get up and leave to go prepare something, and you're just like, "Come back, I don't care." So it was just interesting trying to figure out how to teach these people how to set it up as you're taught in the lesson to turn off all the TVs and sit down and pray, and it's a very formal thing, and they're a very informal culture. So to do a lot of those formal things which to us is normal was just kind of awkward and uncomfortable for them. So it was interesting at the beginning trying to figure out how to not force them to go by certain things, but also trying to create an environment where they could feel the Spirit and learn. Another really difficult thing for me in the beginning was they don't have the same concept of time that we do. Here we're very much structured, and we make appointments, and we try to be on time, and the white handbook says be there 5 minutes, you're representatives of Jesus Christ, and no one wanted to make appointments ever. If we made an appointment, it's because I forced them to pick a time, or I said, "Okay, well, we'll be here at this time," so that I could feel good about making an appointment. But I learned that, any appointment I set up never worked. And they just weren't ever home when we made an appointment. And if I said, okay, we'll be there at this time, they'd be like, well, if I'm here, I'm here. If I'm not, I'm not. So it's just like, okay. So after about a month of trying to get to everywhere when we said we'd be there, and trying to have a very structured plan, we started learning, me and my companion, that you have to work with them differently. You have to understand their culture. And so I think it's important, because no matter which part of the country or the world you go to, there's going to be different cultural things that tie into how you can do the work, because you have to be able to accustom or tailor the missionary work to fit their needs and their customs. And so it became more of kind of learning and remembering when they're home and when's a good time to stop by. And most of the time just showing up when we felt impressed, or when we were working in the area and we thought, oh, they should be home now. And just kind of showing up. And when we just showed up and they were home, they would, be glad for us to come in. But it was just the appointment setting that they didn't like and never worked. And I remember at first getting really frustrated, because, we'd plan every night and make backup plans and backup plans, the backup plans. And then they're never working. And then just feeling like I'm just walking for 9 hours a day doing nothing. And but when I let go of trying to follow my schedule so exactly, and I would make a plan, or like a general idea of who I would want to see, maybe the things that we need to teach, or the people that are on our minds that we need to help, and then kind of have a general direction of where I wanted to go through the day, but being willing and open to new possibilities and opportunities. So like if an opportunity opened up, but we had planned to go here, but as this opportunity opened up, I learned to take those opportunities and be flexible. And I think that's when my work started changing a lot, just because I allowed the Spirit to guide me more of who to talk to, who to help. And a lot of times I would find, like, if I was stressed because we had an appointment, but we found a wonderful teaching opportunity, or a new investigator, or met an old investigator that we've been trying to find for a while. But usually the people that we'd been trying to go weren't even home, and we'd go later and they were there, and it just worked out. And so it was learning to trust more on it being the Lord's work, and just allowing, I guess, giving up control, which, just seemed backward to what I've been taught in the MTC. But I think there were good lessons for me to learn. And I think all missionaries realize at some point in their mission that the mission where they go is perfect for them. And I think it's because the Lord wanted me to learn certain things that I had to develop in order to work with the Argentine people. I got the call that I was going to move into a new area and be training. And it was an area where there already were sisters, so we were just going to come in and so then 2 sets of companionships were going to be working in the same area. And I went to the mission home to pick up my new companion, and we went through the whole day of all the training and the orientation. And then when we came back to the apartment, we dropped off the suitcases, and I didn't want her to unpack, because I remembered when I first came to the mission, I wanted to go out and work as soon as I got there. And my companion thought, oh, just take your time, unpack. When you're ready, we'll go. And I had wished I had just gone out and worked. So I thought, well, we'll drop the stuff off, and then I'll just push her hard for the next couple hours. We didn't know the area at all. We didn't have a map either. There wasn't a map in the apartment. So it was just kind of us just walking around outside and just trying to get to know the area a little bit and talking. And I wanted to give her like a super good example of, of tracking people and just talking to people on the street and talking to everyone, because I wanted her to develop good habits. So we were just kind of walking everywhere, and I was trying to talk to every person that we passed. Usually I don't talk to every single person, but this time I was trying to. And we were coming to a street corner, and we saw this like little old lady kind of hobbling down the road, and she kind of looked at the sidewalk, and she kind of looked like she was busy and did not want to be talked to. But I thought, well, I just need to show her how to talk to someone. So I approached the lady with the first pamphlet of the restoration to just kind of explain to her and give her like a 5-minute overview of the first lesson, because that's one of the things you learn in Preach My Gospel. So I was trying to show how you do it, and the lady, she couldn't hear very well, but she was just like didn't want to listen and was trying to go somewhere, and you could tell she was kind of annoyed that I was trying to talk to her. But I kept talking to her. I don't know why, but I kept talking to her, and she wasn't interested, and I just was talking to her, and then she couldn't go anywhere because I was like, we were standing in front of her, and so we were talking, and she listened, and she told us that she already had a church, and I can't remember if we gave her the pamphlet then or not. I don't think so. But I was trying to ask her for her address so that later we could go by and do a better presentation. And she was like, no. It's one thing that's interesting about Argentina is old people are very nervous about letting anyone know where they live, because there's, even in the course of the time I was in my mission, people would take advantage of, especially female older ladies who lived alone. They would come in and like steal all their jewels or money, and sometimes even kill them. So they were just very nervous to like hide where they lived. So she obviously did not want to tell us, because we're strangers, where she lived. But we like stalked her. We like followed kind of back a ways to see where she went, and then wrote down where she lived. She like lived in this, they're like houses, but they were like houses that were one behind the other, and you had to go through a gate to get in. So we like saw her go through this gate, but we didn't know which house she went to. But we knew that in this area she lived, and I don't know, I just really wanted to teach her, and my companion just thought I was crazy because she clearly wasn't interested, and we stalked her to get her address, and after we'd kind of been meeting people and getting to know the area a little bit, you have like an hour between studies and lunch, so there's not a lot of time, and usually the morning isn't a very good time to teach people. So when we were making plans in the mornings, I always wanted to go to this lady. Her name was Maria, and we'd always try to. So we went, and we were ringing the different, because there was like a speaker, so they could talk to you from inside their home to just see who's there to let people in, and we were just tapping the different ones to try to find which one was this lady, and we found her, but she couldn't really hear us, so she like came out and saw it was us, but we we just talked to her, and I don't really remember what we talked about, but she didn't open the gates. We were never invited in, but we just chatted, and she wasn't really interested, but I think that's when we gave her the folleto, the pamphlet, and we told her we'd come back. And whether she was happy about that, I don't know. I don't remember. But anyways, so then we just started, like, when we didn't know what to do in the morning, we would just go by her house. And every time we'd only talk through the gate. She'd be on one side of the gate, and we'd be on the other side of the gate. And I remember one time we went, and she came out clutching the pamphlet, and she told us that she'd read the pamphlet and it was true. And we were just like, what? Just out of the pamphlet? And it was really, it was like, that was kind of like a heads, like a green light that you can keep going. And so we just started having these regular visits to her house in the morning between the gates, because she still didn't feel comfortable letting us in. And she told us that she liked our church because it included all the churches. Because I think what she means to say, like, it had all the doctrinal bases, but the way she would phrase it was just that our church contained all the churches. So it must be the true one because it was all the churches. And we realized, okay, maybe we'll never get into the home, so maybe we just have to teach the lesson standing up in this kind of odd environment as the cars drive by. So we try to teach her lesson 3 with like the footsteps right there as we're trying to illustrate to her through the gate. And we'd have good conversations. They were always short just because she was just standing outside and just talking to us through the gate. But conference is coming up, so we thought, oh, we'll have to invite her to conference. Maybe she'll come and she never wanted to come to our church. Just because she liked staying in her home. If she was going to go to church, she was going to go to her other church that she already knew people from. I think she didn't like people or being around, because that just made her uncomfortable, I think. So we had a hard time getting her to go to church, and so she wasn't progressing. And we were getting worried that she just wasn't going to progress, and that maybe we needed to stop going and put our time somewhere else. And because they weren't ever really lessons, they were just us talking through the gate. So we decided, well, we'll make an invitation and we'll invite her to general conference. It was going to be held at the Stake Center on the screen. She could just watch, and maybe she'd be interested in that. And then it would be at a later time, so she would feel more comfortable. Anyways, we decided to go one morning, and it just so happened that morning it was pouring rain. So we're walking and we're soaked, and my companion was like, because she was obviously new, should we even be out here? Should we just come back later? And I'm like, no, this is the only time we have. So we went, and through the pouring rain, she came out to the gate, and we just handed her the wet invitation and just asked her to please come. And on Saturday, on the second session, she came. So she came to general conference, and she sat in the back. So we didn't see her till after we saw her come in, but so she didn't sit with us because she sat in the back and we were in the front. And we went up to talk to her afterwards, obviously, to see how it went. And she was just so amazed. She explained to us that she just, while she was listening, just this overwhelming feeling came to her, and just so strong. And it was just amazing the way she explained what she felt, because we hear often in the church, like maybe how the Spirit feels, but for someone outside of the church who's never heard that terminology or is familiar with it, it was really cool to hear her explain it and us know what it was. Anyways, she knew from then on that this was the right church. And then after that, we were invited into her home. She would make us dinner. She would make us nice things. And she came to church every Sunday without fail. after that. She went to some baptisms with us. She just started actively pursuing, I guess, the course of learning the gospel. And it was really neat and really easy to teach her. It was one of the easiest investigators I had over the process. It wasn't like a struggle and a fight every day, but as it was with some investigators. But it was really neat to see how the Spirit would enlighten her mind as we taught her, just because she was older and had a harder time understanding and a hard time hearing, that as we taught, she would perceive and understand. And it was just amazing. You could just tell that she and her, even just learning about her life and understanding and getting to know her, you could just tell that they had been prepared for so long and just waiting for so long to hear the gospel. She told us that she was raised Catholic but knew that it wasn't true, and had been looking and had started listening to the Jehovah's Witness, but never really cared to go to church or anything. Anyways, it was just amazing, and it was just a really neat experience teaching her the gospel. And it was just funny that, it was on my first day in the area with my companion, and me just trying to show how you track people, because, usually never on the people I just randomly accost on the street does it work. That it ends up turning into a good story that they're someone who's been waiting to hear the gospel. But that was one of the times where the person that I just took courage to go and try to say a little bit about the first lesson, and I stalked her too to get her address, but turned out to be someone who was just so prepared and so ready for most of her life to hear the gospel. And it was in her later years in life, but so I guess you just never know who the right people are and who are the people who are prepared. And so you don't give up, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what the lesson is in that. To those who are preparing to go on a mission, I just want to say that it's the best decision probably that you have ever made. There might be some doubts, but because there was with me. But I just wanted to attest to the fact that I know that God knows us, and He has prepared something so wonderful and special and unique to you, that this time that you have dedicated to the Lord is your time to basically walk side by side your Savior, and to learn of Him, and to learn your relationship with Him and what the gospel is all about, and to feel the love that He has for each one of His children, no matter the circumstances or the life that they have had. And for me, my mission is one of the most sacred times in my life, and it's the time that I got to know my Savior more than I had ever known Him before, and the time where my relationship with Him grew, my testimony grew, my knowledge of the Scriptures grew, my understanding of the gospel and the church grew, and I was changed because of my mission. The parts of my nature were changed, my understanding of things were changed, and the experiences I had were unique to me, and the things that Heavenly Father wanted to teach me. I know that this gospel is true. I know that the Savior lives. There were times where I just felt Him so near and just so a part of what we were doing that there's no way that it can't be true. You'll see so many and witness so many miracles, and I I know that this is his work. It's the best work that you could be doing here on earth. I know that Joseph Smith was a prophet and that he restored this church. And I know that we, in our small way, are contributing to the building up of the kingdom of God here on the earth. And I know your mission will be just as important to you and be the foundation for the rest of your life and your spiritual development. And I say these things in Jesus Christ, amen.